Chapter 981. It was one thing for Yun Yang to be confident, but how could the General Commerce League be at ease? The situation of the residents of Nine Supremes was almost clear at a glance. There were only 2 or 3 of them, and their top combat force could barely fight the last few higher-ups of the lower-class Celestial Luck Banners. However, as long as the other side brought out their top combat force or even their combined combat force to fight, the residents of Nine Supremes would be no match for them. The disciples you've recruited are obviously of poor aptitude and are not worthy to be brought to the table at all. There were many battles to be fought for the Celestial Luck Banners, including a one-on-one battle between their top combat force. Most of the battles were fought by the strongest experts of each sect. Then, there was the battle between the top combat force between the 2 sections. Basically, there were 3 matches, but a few of them were decided according to the situation at the time. Then, there were the battles between the core disciples. There were at least 5 matches on this floor, and if no one fought, it would be considered as a defeat. Besides, there was also the final battle of formations, which was a comprehensive battle strategy that gathered the elite combat force of each sect. It went without saying that the sect would turn out in full force. Therefore, although there were 4 rounds of battles in name, the actual number of matches was more than 10. The core disciple battles were usually decided by winning 3 out of 5 matches. As the challenger, only by winning this match would they have the qualifications to enter the next stage of the battle between the top disciples. The battle of the top combat force was usually best of 3 out of 3, and the challenger would only be qualified to enter the next battle of the top combat force if it won this match. If it did not win, it would immediately lose the qualification to challenge the next battle. Then, there was the battle of formations. There were no strict requirements for this battle, and both the winner and the loser could enter the final battle of the top. However, the battle of formations had always been the one with the most casualties in the 4 rounds of battles. As the saying went, injuring 1,000 enemies while injuring 800 was especially applicable here. Basically, after this round, both the challenger and the Banner Guardian sect would suffer heavy losses and be greatly weakened. In the final battle of the top, the opponents were usually the strongest combat force of the sect, putting an end to the battle of the Celestial Luck Banners. As long as one could obtain 3 victories in the flag battle, one would be able to challenge the Celestial Luck Banner of the target, but only a newly ascended sect that won all 4 battles would have the opportunity to challenge the next sect. If one could only win 3 out of 4 battles, he would only be qualified to advance to the last place in the lower-class Celestial Luck Banner. If one wanted to advance further, he would have to wait for 3 years before he could fight again. In other words, if he could keep winning all 4 battles, he would be able to keep advancing, as long as the interval between each victory was less than 3 months. So, theoretically, it was possible to obtain many Celestial Luck Banners in a short period of time. However, the problem now was that the residents of Nine Supremes was too weak. At least, in the eyes of Lang Fantian and the others, Yun Yang's residents of Nine Supremes had no hope of winning any of the battles. Winning a single battle was already an extravagant hope, let alone obtaining the Celestial Luck Banner, winning all 4 battles, and continuously challenging the sects with Celestial Luck Banners that ranked higher than them. Although the cultivation base of Shi Wuchen and his companions was extraordinary, they were at most core disciples in the top few sects with lower-class Celestial Luck Banners. There were only a few days left before the battle of the Celestial Luck Banners began. Could they really make another breakthrough in such a short time? Even if 1 or 2 of them were lucky enough to achieve a breakthrough, it was impossible for all of them to achieve a breakthrough and gain the qualification to pull down Kangwu Union, the last sect with the lower-class Celestial Luck Banner. Lang Fantian left worriedly. "I'll be back in 7 days at most." Lang Fantian and the others sprung up and soared into the sky, speeding toward the southern sky. Song Chonggong and Li Yisan stayed in the residence of Nine Supremes. Song Chonggong was well behaved, staying in the small yard that Yun Yang had given him, not leaving the house at all. Of course, the main reason for his well-behaved behavior was because of his brother. From morning to night, he had been using his refined mystical qi to nurse his sworn brother's meridians. The work was done almost day and night without any signs of fatigue. Li Yisan tried to dissuade him from doing so, but Song Changgong ignored him completely, taking care of his own affairs. I hope that it belongs to two people, not just one. Song Changgong was stubborn. If only one of us can have it, why don't we both just give it up and go to the netherworld together? We brothers can't do anything earth-shattering, but this brotherhood can't be blasphemed, tainted, or killed. Even if it's for each other. On the second morning after Lang Fantian and the others left, the last two members of the Demiurge Flawed 10, Wu Menghuan, the purple-robed Golden Needles, and Luo Dajiang, the star-souled Saber Man, arrived at the residence of 9 Supremes. The Demiurge Flawed 10, the 10 legendary ultimate whetstones, had not been gathered so neatly for a long time. Now, they had finally gathered in the residence of 9 Supremes after such a long time. It was not just Yun Yang, even the 10 of them felt a sense of awe that they had not felt for a long time. The reason why Wu Menghuan and Luo Dajiang had arrived so late was not only because they had traveled the furthest, but also because they had brought their families along. Before they came, they did not seem to have considered whether the residents of 9 Supremes would accept them. The two groups of carriages met in front of the residence of 9 Supremes Mountain Gate. Wu Menghuan leaped down from the carriage and stared at the residence of 9 Supremes Mountain Gate with a distant gaze, not moving for a long time. On the other side, Luo Dajiang did the same. Both of them saw each other's arrival, but it was as if they did not see each other. After a while, Luo Dajiang sighed softly. "It looks like you've made up your mind." "Yes, you've made up your mind too," Wu Menghuan replied quietly. Both of them were still not looking at each other, but they were smiling as they spoke. "Since Shi Wuchen and the rest are here, I believe the residents of 9 Supremes, the 10 Supremes' home, won't disappoint us," Wu Menghuan continued. "Even if we're disappointed, it'll only be the last time." Luo Dajiang's expression was as calm as still water, and so was his tone. We've been lacking the opportunity to join a sect for so many years, but the result of joining it is only disappointment and humiliation again and again," Wu Menghuan said. "We've endured too much of such humiliation before, so we don't mind it anymore. However, if the recommendation from us, the Demiurge Flawed 10, ends up in the same situation, I'm afraid I won't be able to take it." Luo Dajiang was silent for a moment before he murmured, "I hope we can really have a shelter this time." Is such a wish really that extravagant? It is truly extravagant. Both of them still did not look at each other, but they strode forward at the same time. "Please announce that purple-robed Golden Needle Wu Menghuan and Star Soul Saber Man Luo Dajiang have come to join the Mountain Gate." Chapter 982. As a thick white mist rapidly emerged, an equally thick aura of spiritual energy suddenly appeared. Yun Yang appeared with a smile. "Brothers, you're finally here. Yun Yang and the others have been waiting anxiously. Please come in quickly." At this moment, in this instant, the two of them only felt that their hearts, which were originally hanging in mid-air, suddenly calmed down in front of this smiling face, and their hearts immediately warmed up. Wu Menghuan cupped his fists and said, "How dare I trouble Head Supreme Yun to welcome us personally? Where are Shi Wuchen and the rest?" Yun Yang's smile grew more affectionate. "They're all training. I guess they're all unconscious now." "It's alright, come in first, he's been drilled to the point where he's unconscious, right?" These words, why did they sound so horrifying? Was the residence of 9 Supremes not a newly established sect? Yun Yang, Chief Supreme Yun, the founder of the residence of 9 Supremes, had a mediocre cultivation base. What kind of expert could there be in the sect to train Shi Wuchen and the others? It was baffling. At the same time, it was terrifying. Wu Menghuan and Luo Dajiang entered the residence of 9 Supremes Mountain Gate in bewilderment. Behind them, their family members looked around curiously at the various buildings within the residence of Nine Supremes Mountain Gate. Both of them were determined to go all out on this trip, bringing along all their parents and family members, including Wu Menghuan's parents and two younger sisters. Other than his parents, Luo Dejiang also brought along a stubborn girl dressed in red. "Brother Luo, may I ask who this lady is?" Yun Yang was rather puzzled. "I'm Jiang Luo Luo." The girl in red pouted and said, "Jiang Luo Luo, the reverse of Luo Dejiang's name with d removed." Yun Yang coughed. "Oh, sorry for the disrespect." Was this an explanation of her background or her name? It seemed very puzzling and thought-provoking. "Luo Dejiang is my fiancé. We were betrothed when our families were young, but now that my parents are gone, Luo Dejiang doesn't want to acknowledge it and wants to abandon me." Jiang Luoluo's tears fell. "I can't find anyone to stand up for me, and I don't know how to punish this heartless person. I can only follow him. I want to see how this heartless person ends up." "Humph." Luo Dejiang almost vomited blood. "Luo Luo. Can you be a little more reasonable? How am I abandoning you? Haven't you suffered enough humiliation in the days you've been with me? You're a disciple of a mid-level celestial luck banner sect. You have a bright future ahead of you, so why bother to follow a person with a dim future like me? Seeing me being used as a whetstone by those people every day, humiliated and toyed with after using me. Could it be that when a woman looks for a husband, she has to look for someone like me? How can there be a future?" Jiang Luoluo's eyes were filled with stubbornness as she said, "There's no use saying all these useless things. My parents promised me to you back then. If they were still alive, it's fine if you don't want me. I can still ask them to retract their promise. But they're all gone. Where can I find them to take back their orders? Can't a man like you be more responsible? I'm not asking you to be indomitable, but can you keep your word for once? So what if you were humiliated? So what if he had used it and played with it? This is God's test for you. I'm sure you'll achieve great things in the future. You, Luo Dejiang, obviously feel that you'll be great in the future, so you want to dump me in advance. You despise me. You abandoned your wife, you're shameless." Sob. Luo Dejiang's face turned red, helpless. I'm not that kind of person. Then why don't you marry me? How can I marry you like this? Stop fooling around. Why am I fooling around? You're the one who wants to be a heartless person. You're making a false accusation. I'm not. How am I a heartless person? I didn't do anything. You are. You are. The girl's eyes glistened with tears as she said repeatedly, "You are." "Leave now." Luo Dejiang looked conflicted. "I'm no longer alone. When your sect comes looking for me again, it won't just involve me this time, but so many of my brothers are here. Do you want me to implicate my brothers?" The girl glared at him. "As long as you marry me and have a status, I'll leave. Is that all right?" Yun Yang looked at the valiant girl in front of him and could not stop praising her. This girl was truly a model. He had already thought that Ji Lingxi was very valiant, a tomboy, and Shengguan Lingxiu was full of valiance and heroism. However, compared to Jiang Luo Luo, they were immediately at a disadvantage. She was too graceful, too King valiant. Luo Dejiang heaved a long sigh, a hint of tenderness flashing across his eyes. Luo Dejiang was not a fool. How could he not know the girl's feelings? However, it was precisely because he knew that his current situation would only result in him dragging her down, harming her, and tarnishing her reputation. If he really married her, it would be an irreversible disaster for Jiang Luo Luo. The name of the demiurge Flawed 10 was still very threatening. No one dared to touch Jiang Luo Luo now, mainly because the eldest senior brother, the leader of her sect, was fond of her. In terms of status alone, the eldest senior brother's position was naturally far from that of Lang Fantian, elderly Yisan, and guardian Wan Qinglu, but he was on par with Feng Guohai. Naturally, he was a person of high status and power. He would not lose his poise on the surface, nor would he allow anyone to touch Jiang Luoluo. Once they were married, however, what was done could not be undone. The senior brother's dream would be shattered, and he would definitely fly into a rage. Jiang Luoluo would no longer be able to stand in her sect under this rage. Her safety would be threatened, and her life would be at risk. It was not a joke. "Are you leaving or not?" Luo Dujiang hardened his heart, his expression turning cold. Jiang Luoluo burst into tears at once and said loudly, "I know what you're worried about. I understand. As long as you marry me, I won't go back. I'll stay and not go anywhere. I'll only be your mistress in the inner residence." Luo Dujiang sucked in a deep breath, his face livid. "You have a great future ahead of you. You're a true disciple of a middle-class celestial luck banner. What an opportunity that is. Why don't you cherish it?" Yun Yang was not an ordinary person. Although he had only heard half of the conversation, he had already understood the whole story. They were obviously a pair of lovers, but because of the demiurge flawed Ten's identity as a whetstone, they were now separated by life and death. Luo Dujiang, on the other hand, looked like he had resigned himself to his fate. It was obvious that he did not want to hold Jiang Luoluo back, which was why he had reprimanded her harshly. In spite of this, if there was no deep love in his heart, it would be easy for him to abandon her after he had seduced her. In spite of this, he had held on, not even giving her a title. He was afraid that he would harm the person in front of him in a moment of impulse. Chapter 983. Luo Dujiang's parents watched helplessly from the side. Their faces were full of deep regret, and they wanted to say something, but they did not. They had obviously seen this scene too many times. It was not that they did not know what to say, but they did not know how to speak. If they really spoke, who should they persuade and how could they persuade? They were stuck in a dilemma. "Oh, it's Lady Jiang Luoluo." Yun Yang laughed. "It's the residence of 9 Supreme's honor to have Lady Jiang here. Please come in, please come in. Lady Jiang's gracious presence brings light to our humble dwelling. When I first saw Lady Jiang, I've wanted to have a friend like Lady Jiang. Please come in quickly." As he spoke, he gave Jiang Luoluo a look. Jiang Luoluo's expression changed as well as her eyes. She chuckled and said cheerfully, "Greetings, Supreme Cloud. I, Jiang Luoluo, am pleased to meet you. Supreme Cloud, you're my friend from now on. We hit it off right from the start, friends of life and death." Yun Yang laughed. That's right. We hit it off right from the start, friends of life and death. Lady Jiang, please, come in quickly." Before Yun Yang's words echoed in the air, Jiang Luoluo walked into the residence of 9 Supremes with her head held high and chest puffed out, ignoring Luo Dujiang. Luo Dujiang was anxious. "Supreme Cloud, you." "Jiang Luoluo, you can't come in." Jiang Luoluo said with her head held high, "What did you say? What right do you have to say that? Didn't you hear that it was my good friend, Supreme Cloud, who invited me in? What does it have to do with you? Who are you to me? What right do you have to interfere with my freedom? I'm not here with you, I'm here to visit my good friend. Supreme Lord Cloud is my good friend." Luo Dujiang was speechless. "Brother Luo," Yun Yang's expression was still warm as he said slowly, "Friends have come from afar, it's a must to be a good host. Let's talk about it later. Let's welcome you all tonight." He interrupted Luo Dujiang and welcomed Wu Menghuan and Luo Dujiang's family into the residence of 9 Supremes. Wu Menghuan, who had been watching from the side, suddenly wore a sincere smile. His expression relaxed as he laughed. Since it's a welcome, I wonder if there's wine. But is it enough? Of course there is, and it's good wine. There's definitely enough to drink. Great, great. Without another word, Wu Menghuan walked in with Yun Yang, ignoring Luo Dejiang who was standing at the door in a daze. Luo Dejiang stood there blankly for a while, a look of relief flashing quietly in his eyes. He sighed softly and followed them. Her eyes snuck a peek at the red silhouette beside Yun Yang, tenderness flashing in them. At this moment, he was surprised to see Jiang Luoluo suddenly turn around and glare at him. Then, with a snort, she raised her head and walked forward arrogantly. Luo Dajiang's heart softened. How could he not see that the girl's eyes were brimming with tears just now? As she turned her head, the tears fell into the air. He could feel that the girl's mood had finally relaxed a little bit. Perhaps, the residence of 9 Supremes is the place that will truly change my fate. I hope it won't be a disaster because of my arrival, Luo Dejiang murmured in his heart. That night, in order to welcome Luo Dejiang and Wu Menghuan, Dong Qitian kindly gave them a night off and allowed the Demiurge Flawed 10 to reunite and drink. However, beautiful scenery never lasted long. After the feast, Luo Dejiang and Wu Menghuan began their journey to hell. That night, at the banquet table, a total of 12 people were completely drunk. Yun Yang, Qian Duo, and the Demiurge Flawed 10. Young Master of Dark Mist, Shi Bujia, Traceless White Blade, Ren Qingquang, Triautumn Swordsman, Shi Wuchen, Yellow-Clad Sword of Frost, Lan Ruojuan, Purple-Robed Golden Needle, Wu Menghuan, Golden-Armed Scholar, Tai Qingcang, Vicious Physician, Ping Xiaoyi, Star Soul Saber Man, Luo Dejiang, Serene Soul of 9 Springs, Kong Luoyue, and Eternal Sky Assassin, Gua Nuanyang. The Demiurge Flawed 10 had finally reunited after a long time. Each of them had their own experiences that they could not talk about, their untold sorrows and sufferings, and their grievances. But when they gathered together this time, there wasn't a single person that spoke of their encounters after they parted, and all of them chose some interesting matters of the Jianghu to talk about. The room was filled with laughter, and the atmosphere was extremely joyous. Towards the end, when the 10 of them were already tipsy, Wu Menghuan suddenly laughed and howled, saying hoarsely, "The sun and moon are no longer what they used to be. From now on, I'll never be a whetstone." The 9 of them were stunned when they heard him, then they shouted in unison, "All right, we'll never be a whetstone again." Yun Yang, who was sitting at the head of the table, looked indifferent as he said slowly, "I don't think there's anything wrong with being a whetstone." Once Yun Yang spoke, the 10 men glared at him in unison, their eyes glaring at him furiously. The humiliation of being a whetstone had been weighing on them for far too long. Now, someone actually said in front of them that there was nothing wrong with being a whetstone? To put it nicely, it was easy for him to say that, but to put it bluntly, it was a blatant mockery that was poking at their scars. However, the person who had spoken was Yun Yang. The Demiurge Flawed 10 were still very respectful towards Yun Yang, the leader of the residence of 9 Supremes. Although they were unhappy, they did not say anything in the end. In spite of this, the group's mood sank, no longer as excited as before. It was because these people had a good impression of Yun Yang. Those who were slightly darker would have suspected Yun Yang's motive of recruiting the Demiurge Flawed 10. Was he trying to make them into the residents of 9 Supremes' professional whetstones? While he was giving them a place to stay, he was also trying to trap them here and use them to the very end, using them to the very end? Otherwise, why would he say such a thing? I wonder what the so-called whetstone is in this person's eyes and heart. Yun Yang said in a low voice, "First of all, no one can deny that a whetstone has its value. If it doesn't have a certain value, even if you want to be a whetstone, no one will come to you. Don't you think this logic makes sense, everyone?" Shi Bujia raised his brows and said, "Of course we understand this, but all these years, I don't care about your past experiences. It has nothing to do with the topic at hand. We'll talk about it when it's needed in the future. Yun Yang cut him off and said, I only want to ask all of you, during all these years of being a whetstone, did your cultivation base improve quickly? Was your advancement high? Of course we achieved something. If we didn't, wouldn't we have been bullied to death a long time ago? Luo Dejiang said. What are the battle results of all of you in these years? Were they all defeats? Yun Yang's expression was unchanging as he continued to ask without batting an eyelid. Chapter 984. It turns out that all of your achievements are exceptionally dazzling. Why do you think that you're whetstones then? Could it be that you've acknowledged yourselves as whetstones just because your opponents have made you into whetstones? Yun Yang smiled. From what I see, instead of saying that the sect disciples are using you as whetstones to train themselves, it's more like a bunch of whetstones colliding with each other. That's all. Tai Qingcang said, a bunch of whetstones? Do you mean that not only are we whetstones, but our opponents are as well? Can't you think so? While those people are using you as whetstones, aren't they becoming your whetstones at the same time as well? That's why I said that all of you are each other's whetstones. Doesn't this make sense? Yun Yang asked. The 10 men were silent for a moment before they finally nodded in agreement. Yun Yang's words were not wrong. Since there are whetstones, what's a rock? What's a saber? Since all of you are each other's whetstones, it means that it's just a collision between rocks. Yun Yang said, then, where's the real saber? Are they the saber in the end? Or are you the saber? The 10 men fell into silence again, not speaking for a long time. No way. Are all of you starting to feel inferior again? It looks like all of you are too affected by the so-called whetstones. From what I see, at least at this stage, neither of you has the right to be called a saber. What all of you have shown so far is that you're just a rock that's harder. How can you say that you're sharp and invincible? Yun Yang said mercilessly, they've long set their stance and used you all as whetstones, so they're already in an unbeatable state of mind. They're stuck in their own ways and naturally lost. Yet all of you are blaming yourselves and really see yourselves as whetstones. How can you not be defeated with this mentality alone? Yun Yang's expression was amiable, his words meaningful and lingering. Lan Ruojuan pondered for a moment before asking respectfully, may I ask, boss, what should we do? Yun Yang said, first of all, of course, we have to treat our hearts correctly and find our place from the root. Then, we have to fight. Only when we have the heart of a powerhouse and know why we have to fight is the right path of cultivation. Do you understand? What all of you need to do now is to correct your state of mind during this period of time and sort out your strengths and weaknesses, as well as the flaws of your techniques. There are many cultivation books in our sect that can be used as reference so that your path of cultivation won't be rough anymore. This is the first. Secondly, I have to transform myself from a whetstone into an incomparably sharp blade in the upcoming hellish training. Only when you acknowledge the position of saber. Out, that out. Even if you can't transform yourself into a godly weapon in the end, even if you can only transform yourself into a hard saber embryo, there's still hope for you to shine. At least, you're no longer the so-called whetstone, right? Yun Yang paused for a moment before continuing, what I hope to see is, from today onwards, all the celestial destinies elites in the martial world are all whetstones in your eyes, helping you to sharpen your blades as you move forward. Yun Yang's tone was as indifferent as ever, and his gaze was as calm as ever. If you still see yourself as a whetstone and join the residents of 9 Supremes only for a safe and secure place, then you'll be disappointed. It's the same here and there, because the residents of 9 Supremes will only lead a batch of divine weapons to create new worlds and forge new glory. It's not a safe nest for whetstones to shine with the light. He stood up softly. I'll go back and rest first. Think about it carefully. Choose for yourselves who's right and who's wrong. Yunyang turned and floated away. A long time after Yunyang had left, everyone was still in a state of silence. What Yunyang had said earlier had pierced into the hearts of all 10 of them from another angle. Everyone felt their divine souls trembling. That's right. Why am I destined to be a whetstone? Why can't others be mine? After a long, long time, Wuxia sneered and said, the demiurge flawed 10 have been the whetstones in the eyes of the world for far too long. Not only the world, but even those of us who were directly involved have acknowledged their status as whetstones. I, Wuxia, am utterly ashamed. Lan Ruojuan said shamefully, boss, seems to be very disappointed in us. Ren Qingquang said, if it were me, I'd be disappointed as well. We've spent so much effort only to recruit a bunch of stones. Who would be willing to lead a bunch of stones? Even if it's to build a stone city, they'd think that the material is not good enough. Wu Menghuan took a deep breath and said, so if I look at the world from a different perspective, this is how the clouds and mist are parted to reveal the clear sky. Why can't I, Wu Menghuan, use the world's heroes as my whetstones? Luo Dujiang guffawed and said loudly, I've decided. I want all the cultivators in the world to be my whetstones. Who knows, I might have to ask the 9 of you to be my whetstones in this short period of time. A sharp glint flashed across Guanuanyang's eyes. All the cultivators in the world, except me, are whetstones. That's right. All except me, are whetstones. The 10 of them stood up and spoke in unison, their voices deafening. I'm going back to sleep. We'll continue the training tomorrow morning. Straighten your attitude. I'm going back too. I'll participate in the training tomorrow morning. Straighten my attitude. The 10 of them left in a single file. In spite of this, their mental state right now was like a different person compared to just now. The residence of 9 Supremes Hill had long been established, but other than Supreme Cloud, the rest of the 9 Supremes did not have a clear location. Therefore, everyone was temporarily staying in a big yard, including their families. The hill of the residence of 9 Supremes leader isn't a place anyone can enter. Without a position of Supreme, how can one have the face to enter a hill that will belong to someone else sooner or later? Luo Dujiang strode towards the yard where his family stayed. The other 9 people looked at him in surprise, not knowing what he was up to or what he was planning to do. Although his parents were in the family compound, there was still Jiang Luoluo. This guy used to avoid her like the plague and avoided her every day. Luo Dujiang came to the yard's door with a majestic gait and suddenly shouted, Jiang Luoluo. Listen to me. As soon as he said that, everyone, both inside and outside the courtyard, jumped in fright. Jiang Luoluo, who was sitting in a daze before the lamp, was thinking about her uncertain future, about Luo Dujiang's refusal to accept her, and about the grievances she had suffered all these years. Her eyes were already rimmed red, just as she was lamenting herself, thinking that she would have to play the role of a shrewish woman for a long time in the future, constantly expressing her feelings and fighting for her own happiness. She could not help sighing. It was at this moment that she suddenly heard Luo Dujiang shout, and she could not help but be shocked. Why did this fool, who felt that he had no future and was ashamed of his inferiority in front of her despite loving her deeply, suddenly go mad? She got up quickly and looked through the window, only to see Luo Dujiang standing tall in front of the yard's door. He seemed to be filled with an unprecedented majestic and domineering aura. She could not help but be shocked. Luo Dujiang roared, Jiang Luoluo, listen to me. From now on, I won't run away anymore. I want to marry you. I want to make you my wife. Chapter 985. Jiang Luoluo was shocked again when she heard that. Then, she felt her face flush as if it was burning. Her wish had been fulfilled, but a string of tears streamed down her cheeks. The idiot was finally enlightened. The words that she had been waiting for, the words that she had yearned for, felt like she was in a dream. Jiang Luoluo, I'm not afraid of anything anymore. I don't care about anything anymore. You can stay here or go back to your sect. As long as your heart doesn't change, you are my wife. Stay here, and when the residence of 9 Supremes has a foothold, I'll marry you officially. It's the same if you go back to your sect. When the residence of 9 Supremes has a foothold, I'll go to your sect to marry you. If your sect doesn't allow it, I'll make you my wife even if I have to snatch you away. Luo Dejiang roared and roared, his voice shaking the clouds in the sky and dispersing them. Jiang Luoluo burst into tears. I know you can hear me. Luo Dejiang roared, I promise to marry you, I want to marry you. Jiang Luoluo covered her mouth tightly with her hands, a sweet smile blossoming at the corners of her lips, but tears streamed down her cheeks in a continuous stream. Luo Dejiang's majestic voice rang out, what right do I have to be an expert if I don't even dare to face my own feelings sincerely? From today onwards, from now on, I'll face everything in this world truthfully. The first thing I'll face is my own feelings. All the pressure, all the resistance, all the wind and rain, leave it to me. I'll shoulder it all. Jiang Luoluo covered her mouth and was about to rush out and throw herself into the thick embrace, snuggling up to each other. However, another loud roar came from outside. I'm going to sleep. Wait for me. I'm drunk today, but I'm not talking drunk nonsense. Jiang Luoluo stopped at the door, tears streaming down her cheeks, but she could not help but chuckle. This idiot. He's still the same idiot. The figure at the door turned and left, not staying any longer. Outside, the other members of the 9 geniuses were still making a ruckus, and the entire room was filled with chaotic noises that sounded like the howls of wolves. There were even a few fellows that blew their whistles loudly, fully displaying their true colors of hoodlums. F***CK. Luo Dejiang, you're awesome. Why didn't I realize you were so awesome before? Luo Dejiang, I worship you. You're too awesome. Don't change, I have faith in you. Dejiang, you're too awesome. How domineering. As expected of my brother. Brothers support you. Let's just go to the bridal chamber tonight, alright. I support you. Guji guji. Ha 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 ha. Dong Qitian stood at the peak of the mountain, looking down at the bustling scene below. As he listened to the voices, a rare smile appeared on his cold face. The temperament of these 10 brats is really not bad. Once they understood, they immediately put it into action. However, Yun Yang was still the most incisive. As expected of the leader of a sect, to be able to dispel the demons in the hearts of 10 people in such a short period of time. It's like a blow to the head and a sermon to those who are lost. Looks like I have to work harder again. I need to put in more effort in the special training. The Demiurge flawed 10 left in one go. Only one person was left at the table, which had been sitting neatly together. It was little fatty, Qian Duo. The fats on Qian Duo's body jiggled, as if he was extremely agitated. He murmured, the Demiurge flawed 10, who are known as the whetstones of the world's talents, now have the intention to use the whole world as their whetstone. What should I do? Am I really not as good as them? Am I not good enough? I want to join the special training too. As the major domo of the residence of 9 Supremes, this is a position that's second only to one and above all. How can I fall behind? I can't fall too far behind no matter what. I have to keep up with their footsteps. Even if I can't catch up to Boss Yun, I can't lose to those 10 idiots. Who's worse than who? I'll join the hellish training tomorrow morning as well. But I'll only be there for the morning. One needs to be persistent and act according to one's capabilities. I still have business to attend to in the afternoon. Earning resources is my main job now, little fatty told himself with determination in his eyes, the 10 of them use all the cultivators in the world as their whetstones. I'll use everyone who can earn money in the world as my whetstones. I want to earn more money than anyone else. Not only do I want to become an expert, but I also want the residents of 9 Supremes to replace the Tang family and become the wealthiest family in this world. Come on, Qian Duo. You can do it, you can do it. Little Fatty's expression was unprecedentedly determined, his eyes gleaming with the luster of a spiritual jade. As time went by, the number of people in the residence of 9 Supremes increased. During this period of time, Little Fatty had been in constant contact with various human traffickers. The number of young boys and girls under the age of 10 that he had bought alone was more than 3,000. Including the original ones, the residence of 9 Supremes was close to 10,000 in terms of headcount alone. What made Yun Yang especially gratified was that many of the newly bought children had decent aptitudes. This meant that the money spent was not in vain. He then gave Little Fatty another large sum of spiritual jade. Go buy more. Especially those who provide disciples and resources to the various sections. Keep them at all costs. Also, don't forget to build a connection with these human trafficker organizations. Don't let any of them slip through the net in the future. Don't worry about money, don't feel the pinch at all. Yun Yang instructed. Yun Yang's last sentence seemed to be superfluous, but of course, Little Fatty would not feel the pinch. The money spent, despite being huge, was only kept by these human trafficker organizations for a period of time. After a period of time, when they had found out the other party's background and started their operation, they would naturally take it all back. There was even the accumulation of these organizations over the years. In light of this, Little Fatty was full of vigor and did not slack off at all. In the days that followed, it was basically 2 of the Demiurge Flawed 10 who followed Little Fatty to train for half a day each day. The remaining half of the day and night were spent with Little Fatty to do business, acting as bodyguards and spies. In the residence of 9 Supremes, all the children who came to the residence were given basic cultivation methods and a certain amount of cultivation resources. What Yun Yang did not lack at the moment was a large amount of spiritual jade. A certain amount of lower-class spiritual jade was enough to build a foundation for the children who had yet to cultivate their foundation. There was no need to spend more. It was only when a disciple who stood out from the crowd appeared that they would be given further training. As for the children who came to the residence of 9 Supremes, especially those bought from human traffickers, each of them knew that the cultivation opportunity before them was not easy to come by. Once they missed it, it would not come again. Not only did they escape their original tragic fate, but they also had the chance to cultivate. All of them cultivated with all their might, afraid that they would be eliminated by the residents of 9 Supremes. Later on, they learned that they could return home with a sum of money even if they were eliminated or choose to be a servant in the residence of 9 Supremes. However, since they had the chance to become a legitimate sect disciple, why would they want to be a servant? Chapter 986. Yun Yang was happy to see this happen. Without batting an eyelid, he set up a spiritual gathering formation with the ethereal amethysts at the children's living quarters. With such a large formation set within a small formation, the effectiveness increased by several times. The whistling spiritual energy gathered was cleansing the children's meridians and marrow every day, shedding their mortal bodies and changing their bones. On the other hand, those who were recruited by Little Fatty in the beginning were sent away in batches because their talents were so poor that they could hardly cultivate. In spite of this, each of them had 100 gold taels for their journey home. To an ordinary person, this was already a considerable amount of wealth. As long as they did not act recklessly and squander without reason, they would be able to live a carefree life. In this way, the weeds were constantly eliminated and the gold was kept. Round after round of great waves washing the sand, all of it was carried out silently. Yun Yang and the Demiurge Flawed 10 were probably engrossed in Dong Qitian's training, so the raiders of all but God had temporarily stopped their activities. After all, time was running out. The Battle of the Celestial Banner was imminent. Although the Residence of Nine Supremes was a newly established sect that had only been established for a few days, the entire sect was brimming with vigor. Everyone was seizing every second to cultivate and improve. The higher-ups were preparing to fight for the position of the Nine Supremes, while the disciples were gearing up to fight for the position of an inner disciple. Everyone was working hard, doing everything they could. Little Fatty continued to bring back a batch of children every 2 days. Sometimes, he could even bring back 3 batches in a day. Yun Yang was impressed by his efficiency. To think that there would be so many human mediums in the Xianhuang world. This was truly unexpected and shocking. Fortunately, the Residence of Nine Supremes was spacious enough that it could accommodate everyone, no matter how many people came. In spite of this, the children who came in batch after batch would never stay together. This was something Yun Yang had planned long ago. According to the time they came in, he had divided them into the first and second batches. It was now the 19th batch. Although Qian Duo was still bringing people back continuously, the interval between each batch had become longer. Obviously, the stock of human mediums nearby had been almost emptied by Little Fatty. Keep sweeping. Yun Yang was acutely aware that this was the delicate moment when he was about to come into contact with these human mediums higher-ups or their base camp. These human mediums must have more high-level goods in their hands. As long as they continued to interact, they would be able to dig out the root. On this day, Dong Qitian went to Yun Yang and asked for a batch of heaven and earth resources. Are there any heavenly treasures left after exchanging with the spirit's grave? Give it to me if you have it. Dong Qitian was as blunt as ever, simple and crude. Yes. Yun Yang's answer was straightforward as well. Of course Yun Yang had one. The so-called exchange was just a smokescreen to fool the others. All the heavenly treasures he had obtained during this period of time were still in his hands. Whether it was from trading with the General Commerce League or from robbing the raiders of all but God, most of them were still around. Although Emmy was greedy for treasures of heaven and earth, its standards were getting higher and higher, and ordinary items were no longer worthy of its attention. What do you want? I'm going to refine some pills. All right. Very straightforward. I'm not refining the pills for my own use, I'm refining them for those 10 fellows. These 10 fellows' meridians aren't flexible enough, so I have to refine some pills to increase their flexibility before they can consume pills that can elevate their cultivation base. If I forcefully elevate their cultivation base now, they'll be overwhelmed and explode. I have no objections even if I'm giving them to you for your own use. Feel free to use them, it's fine even if you refine them all into pills. You wish, child. I've agreed to train your subordinates, not to be your professional alchemist. Dong Qitian sighed and said. Time is of the essence now, I have no choice but to do this. If I can't speed up those few children's improvement, you won't stand a chance in the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner half a year later. Yun Yang's eyes shone. If that's the case, I'll have to trouble you to only refine pills to elevate your cultivation base. I'll think of a way to improve the meridian's flexibility that you're worried about. I guarantee that all the dangers will be resolved without a hitch. Dong Qitian's eyes widened. Huh. The word huh was a clear indication of his distrust. Yun Yang snorted twice and rolled his eyes. Then, he swaggered off without giving any explanation. How dare you not trust me? Why don't you think about the many old wounds and damaged meridians in your body? Who was the one who healed you? I can even easily heal the injuries that you've sustained for hundreds and thousands of years, what more the little burden you have now? What's there to talk about? Yun Yang was a man of action. That night, he used the Qi of Vitality to soften the meridians of the 11 men. Other than the Demiurge flawed 10, there was also a Little Fatty among the 11 men. When Dong Qitian saw the 11 men again the next morning, his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. "How did you do it?" Dong Qitian pressed. It was obvious that the scene had exceeded Saint Lord Equal's knowledge. The 11 men spoke in unison. "Boss has the medicinal pills, the best of the best. F***ck. Dong Qitian expressed his dissatisfaction with Yun Yang's method. "It's good enough to give them to the 10 of you. It's a waste to give them to this little fatty. Why give them to him? To make him fat? Why give them to him? Do you have so many medicinal pills that you don't have anywhere to put them?" Xian Duo was exasperated by a certain someone's attitude. His mouth was agape, and he was so angry that he could not speak. "I'm so disliked. Just you wait, old man. When my cultivation base surpasses yours, I'll beat you up 8 times a day." Each of the men had a piece of ethereal amethyst in their hands. Outside, there were 108 pieces of ethereal amethysts to reinforce the mountain guarding formation. In addition, Yun Yang had spilled the ethereal amethysts inside the sect to build a second layer of spiritual gathering formation. The efficiency of their cultivation was unprecedented. After all, such a spiritual qi density was at least 20 times higher than other places with dense spiritual qi. In addition to the ethereal amethysts that each of them possessed and the fact that each of them were gifted geniuses, in addition to that, an old monster like Dong Qitian trained them with the ultimate heaven mystic method, the qi of vitality that strengthened their meridians' flexibility, and Dong Qitian's medicinal pills that enhanced their cultivation base. In summary, the 12 men's cultivation base had skyrocketed as if they had a cheat code. It was truly a new height and a new atmosphere every day. Yun Yang's cultivation base had broken through Saint Level 2 and reached beginner Saint Level 3 within these 10 days. It was a leap of 2 whole realms. The Demiurge Flawed 10's advancement was not any weaker than Yun Yang's. Without exception, all of them had advanced to Saint Level 3. With the cultivation base quality of the sect's upper echelon, it could be said that they had already surpassed ordinary lower-class celestial luck banner sections. However, this was only limited to the quality of the sect's upper echelon cultivators. When it came to the cultivation base, ability, and combat experience of the sect's disciples, they were at least worlds apart. Dong Qitian could see this clearly, but he could not do anything about it. "They're all trash. How can we drag them out to fight head-on? Do they have a death wish? Do they have a death wish?" Chapter 987. Early in the morning. The higher-ups of the residence of 9 Supremes, who had temporarily rested for a day, dragged Dong Qitian to the disciples' cultivation area. Before they entered, they could already hear the childish cries from within. These were the first batch of disciples who had entered the residence of 9 Supremes, the first batch of disciples who had started cultivating. Once Dong Qitian entered, his eyes widened again, almost popping out of their sockets. What am I seeing? Are these disciples still the trash I saw when I first arrived? Why are their bones and meridians so exquisite? What's going on? Although the innate aperture acupoints of these disciples didn't change much, the barrier of the aperture acupoints had become a lot thinner, and it wasn't just 1 or 2, but many of the aperture acupoints had become thinner. Once the time was right, the innate aperture acupoints would definitely be greatly improved. Every disciple seemed to be full of spirit and energy, like little wolf cubs full of fighting spirit, and revealed a ruthlessness from their bones. Whether it was the boys or the girls, all of them were cultivating diligently as if their lives depended on it. Although these disciples only practiced the most basic cultivation methods, and their moves were also the most common basic combat skills, but when they fought with each other, they were impressively orderly. This included the 2 little girls, who were around 7 or 8 years old, who were fighting each other seriously with puffed cheeks. The fight was lively, advancing and retreating, neither giving way to the other. Dong Qitian rubbed his eyes. He wanted to wake himself up from the dream, but when he opened his eyes again, there were clearly no changes. Did this mean that this was reality? Was it real? Was it not fake? At the edge of the cultivation area, there were still many 17 or 18 years old youths, 20-something-year-old youths, and a small number of middle-aged men who were quietly carrying out the necessary security work. For example, they boiled water, applied medicine, soothed the children's muscles and bones, massaged their limbs, and some were cooking in full swing. These service personnel were probably the ones who had been eliminated. These people really did not have the talent to cultivate, but they were unwilling to leave the residence of 9 Supremes, so they automatically served the future disciples of the sect. It was obvious that everyone here cherished their days in the residence of 9 Supremes. No one wanted to leave. Young Yun. How did you do it? Dong Qitian had only asked, but he had already understood everything. Who was Dong Qitian? What kind of person was he? What kind of insight and knowledge did he have? He instantly sensed the difference in the spiritual qi here. The unusually rich spiritual qi of heaven and earth here was incomparable to the spiritual qi of heaven and earth where Yun Yang and the others were cultivating, but it was more delicate and gentle. It could be said to be the most suitable environment for those who had just started their cultivation journey. In addition, the spiritual qi concentration was not as good as Yun Yang and the others' cultivation ground. If the concentration of spiritual qi here were to be compared, it would be enough to defeat all the sects and families that did not have the celestial luck banner. What was more, Dong Qitian could even sense a spiritual qi whirlwind flowing in the field, moving back and forth gently. Cultivating in such an atmosphere reminded Dong Qitian of the spiritual cultivation land his master had painstakingly found for him, the spiritual wind valley of rebirth. Cultivating in the spiritual wind valley of rebirth required one to constantly be immersed in the spiritual wind that passed through the valley. Not only could the force of the spiritual wind wash the cultivator's meridians and cleanse the cultivator's bones, but it could also train the cultivator's skin, flesh, and bones. The spiritual wind valley was only effective for children below the age of 15. As for the atmosphere before him, the spiritual wind that was whistling back and forth was more than 10 times more active and frequent than the spiritual wind valley of rebirth. These children seemed to be undergoing marrow cleansing at every moment, being reborn and reborn. Every second. No, it was not just that. If he considered that these children were still fighting with their lives and training themselves with all their might, the effect would be even better with the help of the spiritual wind's cleansing. It was definitely not wishful thinking. Dong Qitian's thoughts raced. He had already made up his mind earlier. The so-called observation was merely a glimpse. What he had learned was shocking, but he did not delve into it. Now that he had taken a closer look, he was shocked to realize that a small portion of these children who were cultivating now had already reached the ultimate heaven sect standards for recruiting disciples. It was an unbelievable miracle. What was the ultimate heaven sect like back then? What was the residence of 9 Supremes now? How could there be such a bizarre situation? With extreme shock, Dong Qitian checked 19 similar locations in a row. The more he looked, the more shocked he became. It was truly a thrilling and shocking sight. All the locations were the same. There were at least dozens of such talented youths hiding in each location. Dong Qitian heaved a deep sigh after his inspection. He studied Yun Yang from head to toe like he was looking at a demon, not saying a word for a long time. Sure, Wuxia and the rest still had their cultivation base limited, and so did their eyesight. Naturally, they could not see the subtleties, but Dong Qitian could see it clearly and understood the deeper meaning behind it. If the residence of 9 Supremes continued to develop at this scale and at this speed, its rise was inevitable and unstoppable. As long as Yun Yang was not stupid enough to recklessly provoke a force that could not be defeated and completely crushed, the future of the residence of 9 Supremes would be smooth and unimpeded. Once it began to rise, it would be unstoppable, advancing at a tremendous pace. Dong Qitian asked himself honestly. Perhaps even the ultimate heaven sect back in the day did not possess such a heaven-defying foundation and ability. We can recruit the first batch of core disciples now. Dong Qitian exhaled deeply, suppressing the shock in him as he gave a suggestion about the sect's disciples for the first time. We can do it now? Yun Yang was genuinely surprised. Indeed. Dong Qitian was speechless. Why does this child still look like he's not satisfied? What else do you want? Do you want to ascend to heaven? If you don't start recruiting core disciples, step up the training, and teach them upper-level cultivation methods and techniques, all of you won't be able to make it to the Celestial Luck Banner competition half a year later. Actually, even if you start now, there might not be many who can be of use in the next half a year. Those who can fight are next to none, at most. Where there's a will, there's a will. As long as there's a chance. Yun Yang was as confident as ever. Dong Qitian was no longer completely disdainful. Instead, he felt like he was witnessing history, from nothing to something. The feeling excited him, and his condition was unprecedentedly good. I originally wanted to transform all these children into ethereal bodies and groom them so that their cultivation would be twice the result with half the effort. Yun Yang was a little regretful. But now, it's barely passable. Dong Qitian staggered and almost fell to the ground. The corners of his lips twitched as he said, "Why don't you die first? You can ascend to heaven directly and fall head first. That's the most satisfying thing. Today is another birthday, a solar birthday. Thank you all for your blessings. Today, I didn't drink." During the meal, my wife said, "Since so many brothers are here, why don't you have a drink?" I rejected her sternly and righteously. I'm a man, I'll quit drinking when I say so. I can't drink no matter what. Everyone looked at me with admiration. My birthday was even better. Chapter 988. As for the white-robed, black-robed, and blue-robed disciples that little Fatty had set up earlier, Yun Yang had abolished all of them with a frown, ignoring them entirely. Little Fatty's plan was based on the old rules of various sects, imitating others, and making a fool out of themselves. If Yun Yang were to imitate everything, he would be suspected of being a traitor. It was better to deal with the current situation directly and think about the follow-up later. Everything in the residence of 9 Supremes was new, so there was no need to deliberately imitate the old bound of universe. Now, the residence of 9 Supremes will only recruit disciples. All of them will be dressed in white, and disciples who can fight will be selected to prepare for the Celestial Luck Banner contest. The ranks will be divided according to age for now, and after the contest, they will be ranked according to their combat strength and achievements. The one with the strongest cultivation base and outstanding battle achievements will be the current eldest senior brother of the residence of 9 Supremes. Such a customization was simple and crude. As for the future, after they become the 9 Supremes' inner disciples, their respective teachers will naturally decide on their assignments. The related clothing and miscellaneous items will also be dealt with in the future. The most urgent thing now is to work hard to improve your cultivation base and combat strength to face the Celestial Luck Banner contest. Everything else will give way. With this notice, all the children in the valley of the residence of 9 Supremes were stirred. Obviously, in the children's eyes, this notice was the real opportunity for all disciples to make a great leap. Sect Leader Master is finally accepting us into the sect. The Celestial Luck Banner contest this time is the opportunity for us to officially enter the sect. Under the command of the stewards, the children walked out neatly in rows, each of them puffing out their chests and standing straight. Their little faces were washed clean and brimming with youthfulness. Everyone was waiting to be selected, hoping that they could be selected. Dong Qitian's deific consciousness swept through the entire residence of 9 Supremes like it had descended from the sky, encompassing all the children. At this moment, his divine aura was like a prison, dominating the world. The more than 3,000 children present all felt a chill in their hearts, and a nervous and perturbed look appeared on their faces at the same time. It had begun. Can I be selected? Dong Qitian's deific consciousness surged like never before, displaying all the children's conditions in front of him. Looking at the nervous little faces, Dong Qitian actually felt an urge to laugh. Actually, regardless of whether it was the mobilization or coming out to line up, it was all just a formality, a formality. Even if all of these children stayed in the room to sleep, he would be able to accurately select them, eliminating the weak and keeping the strong, keeping the elites. Such a big fanfare was only for the sake of the future of the sect, deliberately creating such a grand ceremonial and solemn feeling. It really was like stealing a bell while deceiving one's ears. Dong Qitian looked at them row by row, looking at their spirits first. He felt that each of these little fellows had good spirits. Basically, each of them had a soaring vigor and a kind of ruthlessness. This kind of ruthlessness not only surprised him, but also somewhat moved him. This group of children is not bad. Just this spirit alone has already met my basic requirements. They are outstanding. Dong Qitian murmured and proceeded to pick those with better aptitude and physique, as well as those who could break through the limit of their chakras in the near future. At a glance, he found no less than 100 choices that met his requirements. There are so many. How can this be? Dong Qitian was shocked by his own discovery. Looking closely again, not only did he confirm that it was true, but he also felt a sense of reluctance. He could not bear to give up on this and that. He had picked them according to the ultimate heaven sect standards for selecting disciples, and yet he could not even eliminate a few? What was going on? The children from the first 6 batches, especially, almost all of them were qualified. Each of them was pure gold and unpolished jade. They were worthy. I have to, no matter how reluctant I am. I can only choose the best of the best. Dong Qitian suppressed his thoughts and increased the selection limit according to Yun Yang's request, choosing 99 out of the best. This was the number that Yun Yang had stated earlier. However, it was precisely this head count of less than 100 that made Dong Qitian, a man who had always been decisive, suffer from a dilemma of choice. After some twists and turns, 99 people were finally selected. With a flash of red light, 99 children were selected from their respective groups and floated in the air, quietly drifting out and landing on the large square outside. The selection is complete. As soon as the 4 words were spoken, the remaining 2,000 children bit their lips tightly, tears glistening in their eyes. Their eyes were already red. In spite of this, they still stood strong, staring at the higher-ups of the sect who stood high above, their eyes filled with silent pleading. Are we going to be eliminated just like this? We can't accept this. We can't accept this. Today's Residence of 9 Supremes first selection ends here. Yun Yang's voice came slowly. The second selection will be held a month later. Only 99 people will be selected in each selection. Children, I've seen and remembered your efforts. The selection standard this time isn't to say that you're not as good as the chosen, but the quota is limited. I hope that you'll work harder and strive to enter the Residence of 9 Supremes in the next selection. The children relaxed a little when he said this. However, they were still far from being completely relaxed. These children who came from the lowest rung of society were determined, smart, hardworking, and sensitive at the same time. They knew very well that the sect leader's words were meant to comfort them. The 99 people selected this time must be the best of the best, the best of the best. They must be better than them, or perhaps even better than them. Although they were not sure in which aspect, they must be better than them in some way. What they had to do next was to cultivate harder, be more serious in doing things, and be more attentive in comprehending. Next time, I must be selected. On the other side. Facing the 99 children who had been selected through layers of selection, Wuxia's voice was unusually solemn. Chapter 989. Shi Wuqian's faint voice, laced with an inexplicable indifference, echoed in the air and in the hearts of the disciples. 99 pairs of bright black eyes stared at him nervously, all of them holding their breaths without blinking. They seemed to have made up their minds, no matter how hard and tiring it is, we will never be replaced. All of you, follow me. Shi Wuqian did not waste any more words, walking ahead slowly. After a while, he said, when you enter the 9 Supremes Hall, report your names one by one and swear to join the residence of 9 Supremes without regrets in this life. Another moment later, the children's crisp, yet deafening, swearing came from the 9 Supremes Hall on the mountain peak. We are fortunate to enter the residence of 9 Supremes today and become its disciples. We will not regret this life, we will not betray this life. The young and tender voices converged into bolts of spring thunder, rolling across the sky for a long time without stopping. The thunder of the heavenly path fell with a crash. Below, there were still thousands of children standing solemnly in the same place. Their eyes shone with longing as they looked enviously at the place where the voice came from above the clouds. Those were all his companions, and they were already one step ahead of him. We must work harder to catch up no matter what. We also have to make an oath above the clouds. We want to tell the world loudly that we will not regret joining the residence of 9 Supremes in this life. You're saying that these children were actually bought from human traffickers? Many of them were not even prepared for sex with celestial luck banners? Dong Qitian clicked his tongue in wonder. That's right. These children are so talented. How could no one be interested in them? Even if 1 or 2 of them are blind, it's impossible that all of them are. Preposterous. Preposterous. Of course, this is not their original talent. In fact, before they came to the residence of 9 Supremes, their original talent was only average. Just like what you saw when you first arrived. Huh? You mean that the residence of 9 Supremes has a way to enhance a person's innate talent in a short period of time? With such an immediate effect and godlike effect, it can benefit many people and be used repeatedly? I didn't say that. Senior, don't put me on the fire to roast. I understand. I won't ask. According to what you've said, there isn't even a single rich disciple among the residents of 9 Supremes disciples now? Dong Qitian asked. The residence of 9 Supremes is just a newly established one. I don't want any trouble. This is not a matter of trouble. Most of the children of rich families would have their meridians cleansed from birth at the expense of their elders. This starting point was something that the children under him could not compare to. As the saying goes, the poor are scholars while the rich are martial artists. This makes sense. How could I not know this? But the children of rich families also have many problems. Yun Yang was unmoved, replying indifferently, especially when we don't have much capital to attract them now. There's no need to go through the trouble of recruiting manpower, it's half the result with twice the effort. What about the future? In the future? Yun Yang looked at Dong Qitian mockingly. It's even less necessary in the future. Once the residence of 9 Supremes gains a firm foothold and obtains the celestial luck banner, the spiritual qi density of our sex base will definitely double or triple. I mean, on top of what we have now. When that time comes, it'll only be easier for this place to produce genius disciples in batches. Since it can be done without external help, why do I need those so-called geniuses in the secular world? Yun Yang looked at the faces of the children in the residence of 9 Supremes, his expression gentle as he said faintly, although these children in front of me have suffered a lot, they've learned a lot about the fickleness of human nature and the cruelty of the world. They know more about the cruelty of the world than anyone else, so they'll cherish everything they have now and do their best to protect what they have. I'm willing to brighten their future. I believe that their tolerance for suffering and pain is definitely much stronger than many children of the same age who have not experienced similar experiences. The hardships they've gone through may not be compensated in this world, under the heavens. But I'm willing to give them a chance. A bright future, a position above the clouds, is the chance I can give them. Yunyang smiled and said, as long as they work hard, they'll have a glorious tomorrow. Dong Qitian was silent for a long time before he finally sighed deeply and said, your thinking is a little biased, even extreme, but I have to admit that you have a point. Yunyang said, from what I see, this is an unbreakable truth. How is it extreme? Dong Qitian said, why don't you tell me directly why you're doing this? Yunyang looked at the horizon and said, it's just that everyone shares the same heart and the same principle. Since I was born until now, I've been an orphan for more than 20 years. The flash of desolation in his eyes made Dong Qitian's heart skip a beat. He suddenly understood the source of Yunyang's motivation and the true meaning behind his actions. Rich kids cry when they're scolded, they cry when they fall, they cry when they're bullied, they cry when their toys are snatched away, they cry when they're hurt, they cry when they're hungry. And as long as they cry, there's someone to comfort them. Yunyang pointed down and said softly, but these kids are abducted and bullied. They live in a high-pressure environment every day. They're in pain every moment, but they rarely cry. Because they know that it's useless to cry. No one will comfort them because they cry. Instead, they'll be beaten up even more because they cry too much. They're getting used to it. Even if they're bitten by a dog, they can only wrap it up with tears in their eyes. When they're beaten, they can only grit their teeth and bear it without shedding a single tear. I've rarely cried since I was young. I'm the same as them because we all know that it's useless to cry. Since it's useless, what's the point of crying? Yunyang lifted his head and said, the reason I'm willing to give them a chance is that I hope their future will be like mine. They'll keep their tears in their hearts and laugh freely in the face of this world, the martial world, and conquer it. Only this is the residence of 9 Supremes in my heart. The true residence of 9 Supremes. Dong Qitian ruminated on Yunyang's words. He had a feeling that his feelings, or rather, Yunyang's actions, must have their original intentions. However, it was obvious that Yunyang was unwilling to speak of it. Yunyang's gaze was fixed on the void, as if the faces of the 9 Supremes brothers were floating before his eyes. We're all from the lowest rung of society. We know our pain. So, if we conquer the world in the future and Yutong rules over the world, then, no matter who it is, we must remember to give more support to the children of the lowest rung. They're suffering too much. And, there's no hope. If we don't give them hope when the time comes, what's the point of us fighting for our entire lives? Yunyang's eyes were shining. He murmured, hope. I'll give. Chapter 990. The residents of 9 Supremes had chosen a total of 99 children for the first time. It seemed like a lot in terms of headcount, but the residents of 9 Supremes taught disciples according to their respective peaks. If they were to be distributed evenly among the 9 peaks, there would only be about a dozen of them in each peak. Moreover, there was the central peak that was connected to Supreme Cloud's first peak. Not only was it not a lot when 99 people were distributed, it was actually very limited. Because the quality of this batch of disciples was already the best of the best, each of them was talented, there was no need to deliberately compete with each other. They were all brought back to their respective peaks by the deacons of their respective peaks, waiting for the peak master to teach and train them. However, there was another problem that had to be solved, and it was extremely urgent. The 9 peak masters had not been decided yet. Yunyang decided at once that it was time to decide the positions of the 8 Supremes in the residence of 9 Supremes other than himself. Yunyang's initial plan was to determine the positions of the 9 peak leaders based on their merits and cultivation base after dealing with the human traffickers. However, the situation had changed and his plans could not keep up with the changes. It was too late to follow his original plan. The competition of the 9 peaks shall begin tomorrow morning to determine the residence of 9 supremes. Yun Yang made a prompt decision. Brothers, be prepared. Yun Yang's decision had stirred up a storm among the Demiurge Flawed 10, causing a commotion. Shi Wuchen and the other 10 began to rub their palms in unison, full of pride and eagerness. Their gazes scanned the others maliciously as they turned their necks and flexed their wrists, chuckling sinisterly. Their behavior was extremely creepy. Shi Bujia chortled, he. Shi Wuchen chortled, ha. Ren Qinghuang chortled, he. Lan Ruojuan chortled, he. Wu Menghuan chortled, he. Tai Qingcang chortled, he. Ping Xiaoyi chortled, he. Luo Dejiang chortled, wahaha. Kong Luoyue chortled, he. The last one, Guanuanyang, did not have a unique laugh to choose from, so he twisted his waist and moaned, he. Kong Luoyue and Guanuanyang's moan sent chills down everyone's spines. They looked at Kong Luoyue and Guanuanyang as if they were looking at 2 perverts. It was too scary. Yun Yang and Dong Qitian exchanged glances, secretly rejoicing that the 99 disciples had been sent to the 9 peaks. If they were still here and heard about Kong Luoyue and Guanuanyang's behavior, it was guaranteed that no one would choose them as their master. Furthermore, Yun Yang dared not put them in an important position even if they were chosen. Disciples who could voluntarily enter the tutelage of such people must have an unusual psychological quality. It was better to take unnecessary risks. Yun Yang waited for a moment to let the awkward atmosphere pass before he said seriously, the residence of 9 supremes, as the name suggests, only has 9 supreme-level leaders to make the name of the 9 supremes complete and legitimate. However, there are 10 of them among the Demiurge Flawed 10 alone. I believe everyone has already made up their minds about the difference, so I shall not elaborate further. As for who can become one of the 9 supremes, it will depend on one's own ability. Therefore, everyone must be prepared. Once the winner is determined, it will be the final verdict. The 10 men guffawed. Of course. We're the residents of 9 supremes, not the residents of 11 supremes. Putting aside Boss Yun's position as the lead supreme, the other 8 positions should be taken by those who are capable. What right do those who are inferior have to covet it? The competition will be swift. If it were up to me, eliminating Ping Xiaoyi and Shi Wuchen is exactly what everyone wants. Yes, eliminating Shi Wuchen and Ping Xiaoyi will save time and effort. It'll be satisfying. Ping Xiaoyi was enraged. What do you mean by what everyone wants? Of course I'm happy to see Shi Wuchen eliminated, but why do you have to bring me along? Who have I offended? Is there any justice in this world? Shi Wuchen was even more enraged. How can all of you talk like this? Especially you, Ping Xiaoyi. What do you mean you're happy to see Shi Wuchen eliminated? Are you guys even talking like a human being? It's not certain who will be eliminated. The position of the second supreme of the 9 supremes is mine, Shi Wuchen. No one can take it away. Give it a try if you don't believe me. Let's see who's the real deal. The men sneered. Let's give it a try. Let's see who's the real deal. That's right. No matter who's eliminated, just give him a job. What right does he have to make a fuss if he's inferior? The 10 men looked relaxed and excited, as if they were eager to fight. They were brimming with confidence and did not take it seriously. Before the competition, I have something to say. Yun Yang enunciated each word clearly. This competition between brothers is only for the position. It's normal not to give in and not to show mercy, but remember to hold back. There must be no casualties. Besides, no matter who's eliminated from the 9 supremes position in the end, there must be no resentment. If you're willing to bet, you must be willing to lose. This must be made clear in advance, lest a grudge arises later on. It's not something I'd like to see. The 10 men guffawed. Don't worry about this, boss. We, the Demiurge Flawed 10, still have this much breadth of mind. If there's anyone who can't afford to lose, just leave. Alright, let's cut the nonsense. Go back and get ready. Tomorrow morning, at the Central Peak Square, the Supreme Ranking will officially begin. Alright. When Yun-Yang announced the selection of the 9 Supremes the next day, the bound of universe was suddenly stirred up by a piece of news that stirred up a storm. The Celestial Luck Banner Tournament, the battle for the Celestial Luck Banner, is about to officially begin. All sects who wish to compete for the Celestial Luck Banner must complete the registration within half a month. Those who fail to register within the time limit will be disqualified from the battle for the Celestial Luck Banner. The symbol of the Bound of Universe's Celestial Luck Banner Tournament, the Bound of Universe's Celestial Luck Banner Tournament, had appeared in the world. Thousands of mountains and valleys were stirred because of this order. The fateful moment had arrived as scheduled. Countless sects immediately sent out the highest order of their sects, ordering all their disciples who were traveling in the martial world to return immediately. Prepare for war. The heaven and earth were plunged into an unprecedented solemn atmosphere. Early morning. The battle for the residence of 9 Supreme Ranking had officially begun. 10 men emerged in a single file, brimming with a strong will to fight and an unparalleled aura. For a moment, the overwhelming will to fight wreaked havoc above the residence of 9 Supremes, stirring the wind and clouds. Looking at their brothers opposite them, their eyes were burning with fire and their demeanor was insolent. Dong Qitian, the chief instructor, naturally became the judge. Yun-Yang and Little Fatty were only responsible for watching the show and waiting for the final result. Of course, Little Fatty Qian Duo was really just there to watch the show. Yun-Yang, on the other hand, had to make his own judgment on these 10 men based on his own observation, including the positions they would hold in the future and which aspect of the sect they would be responsible for. He had to draw a conclusion based on today's observation. Chapter 991. The rules of the 9 Supremes this time were simple. 10 people would be divided into 5 groups and would draw lots to decide who would fight in the first round. Once the first round was over, there would naturally be 5 winners and 5 losers, and the winner would advance. In the second round, the 5 people in the winners group would draw lots again. 4 of them would fight in 2 rounds, and the last person would be on standby. When the second round was over, the winners of the 2 rounds would naturally advance, while the one who would be on standby would draw lots to fight one of the 2 losers in the second round. In the end, there would be 3 candidates for the final battle. In the third round, these 3 candidates would take turns to kill each other, and the strongest would be the second Supreme that everyone yearned for. The second Supreme of the residence of 9 Supremes would be the second Supreme. Under the second Supreme, the other 2 candidates would be the third and fourth Supreme based on their battle results. The remaining people would continue to draw lots and fight again, deciding the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 9th Supreme positions. Excluding the 2 people who ranked last, the order of the residence of 9 Supremes was more or less decided. The remaining 2 would take up other positions in the residence of 9 Supremes, such as the Disciplinary Hall, the Combat Hall, or something else. It had to be said that the rules were really easy. They could be seen clearly with just a glance. No one doubted whether there was an element of luck in this, because luck was a very important component of a cultivator's overall ability. There was even an ancient saying that was deeply rooted in people's hearts: when luck comes, the city wall can't stop it. Even pigs can fly. Wuxia was the first to step up. I'll go first. He stood up with a belly full of rage. Don't all of you dislike me? I'll be the first to draw lots. Let me tell you, no matter who I draw, I won't show any mercy. Just you wait. The 9 people were not offended when they heard him, but laughed in unison. Who wants you to show mercy? You'd better worry about yourself. Wuxia snorted angrily and strode forward. With a stretch of his hand, he drew a name without hesitation, opened it, and guffawed. Kong Luoyue. Come out and call me Big Brother. Kong Luoyue leaped out furiously, rubbing his palms together. I was just about to teach you a lesson, you bastard. Subsequently, Shi Bujia drew Tai Qingcang, Ren Qinghuang drew Gua Nuanyang, Lan Ruojuan drew Wu Menghuan, and Luo Dejiang was naturally matched with Ping Xiaoyi. As soon as the result came out, Luo Dejiang's face twisted. The others also looked at him with gloating expressions. Among these people, the one they were least willing to make an enemy out of was probably Ping Xiaoyi. This guy was known as the vicious physician, and it was definitely not a nickname that he would rather brag about himself. He truly lived up to his name. His entire body was filled with poison, and even if one's cultivation was higher than his, they would still fall into his trap if they were not careful. The others breathed a sigh of relief when Luo Dejiang drew Ping Xiaoyi for his first match. After all, the first round of the battle was directly linked to the ranking of the Venerables. Once they lost, they would no longer be able to obtain a higher position. The initial plan for the 5 matches in the first round was to start at the same time, but Yun Yang had suddenly changed his mind when the matches were about to begin. Let's fight them one-on-one. We still have time, Yun Yang said. Everyone can learn from your own battles and familiarize yourselves with each other's fighting style. I believe that we'll have a clear idea of what to do when we work together later on. Everyone nodded in agreement, thinking that it was reasonable. Dong Qitian was the only one who turned to glance at Yun Yang, a faint hint of approval flashing across his eyes. The first 2 to start the battle were Shi Wuchen and Kong Luoyue. The 2 brothers who had been through life and death jumped out at the same time. Shi Wuchen's weapon was naturally the triautum sword that he had been famous for a long time, while Kong Luoyue's weapon was not the long sword he had used in the previous battle. Instead, it was replaced by 2 strange weapons that looked pitch black. The 2 weapons were shaped like 2 sharp awls, the tips of the weapons filled with strange patterns of sharpness. Kong Luoyue said faintly, Shi Wuchen, you're out of luck today. I've never presented these 2 weapons in my hands to anyone before. They're called the Hidden Soul Spikes. Not only are they sharp and dangerous, but they also have hidden mechanisms within them. There are countless hidden soul spikes that could appear at any time. It's impossible to guard against them. He smiled faintly. So, Shi Wuchen, you must be very careful. Be very careful. Don't cry about how unfair it is when you've been tricked by me. Shi Wuchen was enraged, pointing his sword at Kong Luoyue. What nonsense are you spouting? Come up and receive your beating. During this period of time, the other 9 people had been singling out Shi Wuchen. Just because he was 1 step ahead, Shi Wuchen's heart was already on the verge of exploding. This time, it was a legitimate opportunity for Shi Wuchen to retaliate. Of course, he wanted to vent his frustrations. Moreover, he still had the trump card that his boss had specially prepared for him. Humph. Do you really think that my triautum sword is still the same triautum sword? Shi Wuchen was confident that victory was within his grasp and that he would succeed in every endeavor. Dong Qitian was initially nonchalant. After all, to his actual level, the duel between 2 saint-level cultivators was not a battle of life and death. It was merely a competition between the same sect, so he was not too interested. However, after taking a look at the duo's aura and the surging battle intent, his expression turned into one of focus. With his cultivation base, there was no need for him to pay too much attention to the details of the battle as the referee for a duel of this level. Even if there were any accidents, they could be easily resolved. Although the slightest difference could decide the outcome of a battle at Shi Wuchen and his companion's level, even if it was not a battle of life and death and only a matter of victory, there would still be earth-shattering noises and danger looming at any moment. Dong Qitian still did not need to pay too much attention. At most, he dared not be too careless. However, with Shi Wuchen and his companions' movements, the aura and battle intent far exceeded the atmosphere of a battle between ordinary saint-level cultivators. It made Dong Qitian more serious and concerned. Why are these two people's auras so strong? Yun Yang, on the other hand, paid close attention to the duo's gaze and expression, especially the subtle movements that did not belong to the battle. Dong Qitian's job was to judge the outcome of the battle and stop it at once if there were any accidents. Yun Yang, on the other hand, wanted to judge the character and temperament of the people before him, as well as their mentality to win or lose in the grand scheme of things. Although the strength of an individual's cultivation base and the outcome of today's battle were important as they would affect everyone's status in the residence of 9 Supremes in the future, it was unavoidable to place too much emphasis on them. On the contrary, character and temperament were the key to success. With a clear whistle in the field, both men moved at the same time and engaged in battle. The sword in Shi Wuchen's hand was waved abruptly, and a desolate aura of 3 autumn surged abruptly and spread rapidly. It was the 3rd month of spring, the season of early spring, when the grasses were long and the nightingales were in flight. However, as Shi Wuchen's sword light flashed, the spectators could clearly feel a sense of autumn. Autumn was cool. Desolate. The sky was high and the clouds were thin. Chapter 992. Seeing that Shi Wuchen was going all out right from the start, Kong Luoyue was not to be outdone. With a flip of his hands, the 2 pitch-black dark soul spikes, one above and the other below, reflected a faint glow. His entire being seemed to have melted into the darkness, a stark contrast from the pervading autumn air. It was as if he was a ghost, blending into the night like water and milk, as if it was made by nature. Only the 2 spots of dim light were like the last embers in the darkness, flickering without end. In the next moment, Shi Wuchen leaped into the air, his long sword gleaming in the air. A chilly aura of autumn sliced through the air like a waterfall and came crashing down. In the process of its descent, a whistling autumn wind was generated, sweeping through the surroundings. Halfway through the move, the sword gleam turned into autumn rain that poured down from the sky, shrouding the entire area. It was an indiscriminate attack that covered a large area. As the saying went, an expert's skill would be known the moment he made his move. The Demiurge Flawed 10, who had been clamoring to kick Shi Wuchen out of the 9 Supreme sequence, looked unprecedentedly solemn when they saw Shi Wuchen's move. They did not expect Shi Wuchen's swordsmanship to have reached such a terrifying level, far exceeding their initial estimation. The sword intent was abundant. It was only then that Shi Wuchen's voice rang out leisurely, "Kong Luoyue, you think too highly of yourself because you have a trump card. I'd like to see how many strikes you can take from me. This is the first strike of my melancholy desolation swordsmanship. Autumn comes after the summer. I'm not afraid to tell you that the name of this move is Beginning of Autumn." Kong Luoyue's expression remained the same. His body swayed and turned into a cloud of hazy fog like a ghost, pulling a distance of 100 feet in an instant. Ghostly fog rose around him. The 2 black gleams surged forward, one above and one below. Halfway through their journey, they turned into 2 long black rivers, one high and one low. They surged and surged, the waves surging and surging. Finally, they soared into the sky and blocked the autumn rain and wind, as if they intended to go against the trend and launch a massive counterattack. At the same time, a cold voice rang out at the same time, "The gates of hell open, the netherworld river comes." With 2 soft clanging sounds, the autumn intent and the ghost fog that filled the air rose again. The area within 100 feet of where the 2 were fighting suddenly expanded to a space of 500 feet. There was also a figure in green who shot up into the sky. It was Shi Wuchen. He was one with his sword, and his body and sword became one. He soared into the sky at an incredible speed. As Shi Wuchen's sword light soared into the sky, 2 more spots of dim light chased after it from below. It was as if the Nether River was mixed with two spots of dim light that had never been extinguished since ancient times, and its power was even greater than before. Everyone's eyes were focused on the sword light that was rapidly rising to the sky. It transformed into many cold stars that fell in a fan shape. Halfway through, the cold stars had already turned into white frost that filled the sky. 10,000 layers of autumn dew and frost. Take this, my white dew. Seeing that another vicious move was coming, the raging Nether River rolled back abruptly. Kong Luoyue let out a long howl as his black silhouette shot out diagonally like an arrow. Although he was evading at top speed, the two beams of cold light in his hands changed direction and collided with Shi Wuchen's autumn intent sword again. Home viewing platform, one look back. Home viewing platform, one look back again. Home viewing platform, one step back 3 times. The ghost-like dark soul spike surged again and again, turning into the Nether River that flowed against the current. The waves rolled into the sky, and a large amount of ghost fog rose into the air. Its momentum seemed to be even stronger than Shi Wuchen's autumn intent sword. Dong Qitian shook his head as he watched. Yunyang frowned as well, and the rest of the Demiurge Flood 8 looked regretful as well. At this point, the outcome of the battle was already decided. Kong Luoyue was at a complete disadvantage. Although the current situation was still stable and Kong Luoyue's 3-move combo had given him a slight advantage, what was the actual situation? Shi Wuchen had only used 2 moves so far, beginning of autumn and white dew of the tri-autumn sword style. He had yet to use the mid-autumn and late autumn moves, but Kong Luoyue had already countered with 4 moves. The current situation was one thing, but in terms of their respective trump cards, Kong Luoyue had fallen into an extremely passive position. Dong Qitian and Yunyang were not the only ones who could see it clearly. The rest of the Demiurge Flood 10 were well aware of it as well, having a general judgment of the battle. As expected, Shi Wuchen's sword light flashed. It was not only the sword light that was initially descending, but sword light surged up from the ground as well, forming a converging force that attacked from above and below. Then, another cold glint shot out from the gap between the top and the bottom, attacking Kong Luoyue forcefully. Heaven and Earth in Autumn Division. Take this, my Autumn Division. The cold glint was born from the converging sword of Heaven and Earth. Not only did it penetrate Kong Luoyue's ghastly fog, it was also aimed at Kong Luoyue's throat. However, the unparalleled sword suddenly slowed down at the last moment before it hit Kong Luoyue. The tip of the sword drooped a little, deviating from its initial landing point. Kong Luoyue had been crossing the hidden soul stab, trying to focus his attack. A menacing ghost head was not formed and he did not have enough energy to gather. It was the slight delay that gave him a chance to turn the situation around, despite it being only a millimeter's difference. His eyes glinted as he sucked in a mouthful of qi at the last moment. The skull that had already been formed dissipated abruptly as he hollered, "Come, let's go for it." The hidden soul stab met the attack head-on, colliding with the tri-autumn sword in the most direct and violent way. There was a loud explosion and green robes fluttered as Shi Wuchen flipped and landed lightly on the ground. On the opposite side, Kong Luoyue staggered 30 feet back and staggered, swaying for quite a while. There was a flash of relief in Shi Wuchen's eyes. Kong Luoyue managed to steady himself and looked up with a bitter smile. "I've lost." Shi Wuchen was silent for a moment before he said, "You haven't even used the hidden soul stab. Aren't you upset about admitting defeat?" Kong Luoyue retorted angrily, "Stop acting like you've won. You're in the game, so you know the outcome. You're just a little stronger than me now, so what? So what if I use the hidden soul stab? You'll be heavily injured and I'll die." Shi Wuchen laughed and said, "Brother, I owe you a favor." Kong Luoyue pursed his lips and said, "Do I care?" Before his voice trailed off, he had already kept the hidden soul stab in his hand and vanished in a twirl. He turned to walk back and said loudly, F***ck, I've lost. Itua is so much stronger than before. There's no justice in this world. The rest of the demiurge flawed ten guffawed. You can't even beat Itua, and you still have the cheek to talk. The scene immediately burst into an uproar, and everyone laughed and joked for a while. There was a smile on Yun Yang's face, comforted. In terms of victory and defeat, Shi Wuchen undoubtedly had the upper hand, everyone could see that. However, if it was a battle of life and death, Kong Luoyue might not necessarily be at a disadvantage. Once the hidden soul stab was used, the worst outcome would still be Shi Wuchen heavily injured and Kong Luoyue defeated. The other outcome, which was more likely, was to perish together, hand in hand. Chapter 993. Both of them had given in one after the other, and this was the result they got. If Kong Luoyue had used the soul-concealing needle, he would still have been defeated. Even if Shi Wuchen had won this match, he would not be able to continue today and could no longer compete with the others. Yun Yang was pleased with the result, but he did not say anything or make any comments. He dismissed it with a smile and ordered, Team 2. In his heart, however, he thought, Shi Wuchen held back first and pressed his sword against the throat in an instant. Victory was already in his grasp. Kong Luoyue actually did not have the chance to use the soul-concealing needle, but Shi Wuchen held back at that crucial moment. It's enough to show their brotherhood and consideration of the bigger picture. Kong Luoyue, on the other hand, gave up the final counterattack resolutely when he had the chance to turn the tables. He would rather lose and let his opponent have a chance to retaliate. It's also a sign of their brotherhood, a sign of righteousness. The two of them are quite good in terms of the overall situation, forming their own ravines. Their brotherhood is even more flawless. You can consider these two people to handle matters related to this aspect in the sect. Next, the battle between Shi Wuchen and Tai Qingsong in the second team was even more eye-catching. One of them was called the Young Master of Black Mist while the other was called the Golden-Armed Scholar. Based on their nicknames alone, perhaps 9 out of 10 people would think that both of them were the kind of people with delicate features and slim physiques. However, the truth was just the opposite. Although the two of them had delicate features, their bodies were tall and sturdy. In any case, they were not thin at all. As soon as the two men started fighting, they fought mercilessly, causing the ground to shake and the mountains to shake. It was even more spectacular than the battle between Shi and Kong. If the residents of 9 Supreme's mountain guarding formation was not really powerful, it would have collapsed from the impact of the two men in just a few moves. The young master of Black Mist was completely hidden in a cloud of black mist, but there was not a trace of treachery in his moves. Each of his moves was powerful and heavy. The golden-armed scholar that Yun Yang had been longing for finally appeared before his eyes. Tai Qingsong flipped his sleeves, his hands and wrists glinting in a golden light. It was an invulnerable style as he faced Shi Wuchen with his hands. Wherever his fists and palms passed, it was like a giant axe splitting a mountain. The god of thunder was enraged. Yun Yang's eyes were twitching uncontrollably. This scholar, this young master, every move, every move, every move, every move, every move, every move, the posture of a person who was not afraid of death. When the two of them met, it was as if they were old enemies from their previous lives coming together. Both of them were walking the path of absolute strength. When the battle reached a certain point, it was more straightforward. You use your sword, I use my hand. Everyone was facing each other head-on. There were no tricks or tricks at all. It didn't matter what kind of moves they used or what kind of movement techniques they used, all they did was boom 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 boom, everyone watched with their mouths crooked and eyes slanted, and they were speechless. Golden light flashed and black mist rose. Finally, the young master of the dark mist was furious. What is your hand made of? How could it dent my heavy sword? I don't want to fight anymore." After saying those words, he admitted defeat and withdrew from the arena. Laughing, Tai Ching-sung stretched out his golden hand and roared triumphantly, "This is my hand. Golden hand. Invincible." The spectators spat in unison, but when they looked at the two men again, their expressions were solemn. When the two of them were together, they fought fiercely, and the audience enjoyed watching them. However, if it was another person who fought against either of them, they would not have the confidence to win. This kind of fighting style was too wild, too extreme. How should they deal with it if they were to encounter it? Could their best skill deal with the opponent? Everyone was considering it with a slight frown. Obviously, they did not have much confidence. As the winner, Tai Ching-sung strode away from the team and stood opposite Shi Wuchen, laughing. "Shi Wuchen, I'll beat you into a pile of meat later and let you live up to your name." Shi Wuchen sneered. "It's too early for you to," he snorted and turned his head away, completely ignoring Tai Ching-sung's provocation. Yun Yang was deep in thought, thinking about how to settle these two men. Both Tai Ching-sung and Shi Wuchen are the aggressive type, and they can be said to be brave generals. In the future, it will be their duty to charge and break through enemy lines, kill generals, and seize flags. The war hall is the best choice. However, if we study their temperaments carefully, Shi Wuchen is rough but meticulous, and he has some inner beauty. Tai Ching-sung looks rough and unsophisticated, but in fact, he's a typical example of someone who pretends to be a pig to eat a tiger. Neither of them is completely brave. As Yun Yang fell into deep thought, the next team had already begun fighting. This time, it was Ren Qingquang and Guo Nuanyang. Ren Qingquang used a sword, and so did Guo Nuanyang. Swords were the most common weapons in the bound of universe. At least 6 out of 10 people would use swords, and half of the demiurge flawed 10 were swordsmen as well. However, there were differences in the use of swords. For example, Shi Wuchen and Ren Qingquang's swords belonged to the conventional style, while Guo Nuanyang's sword was not only much narrower, it was also much longer. The sword's form was different, and so were the styles. Ren Qingquang's fighting style was standard, his foundation evident in his simplicity, and was not inferior to Shi Wuchen's. However, it was not as if he did not have anything to rely on, as he yearned for Shi Wuchen's position as supreme sword. Guo Nuanyang's fighting style, on the other hand, was bizarre and unpredictable. Ren Qingquang might not even counterattack once out of 10 strikes, but once he did, it would be a highly threatening and targeted ruthless move. Eternal Heaven's assassin lives up to his name. Yun Yang snapped out of his thoughts and watched the battle between the two men. It only took him a moment to figure out the key to the battle's outcome. Yun Yang quickly came to a conclusion. The two combatants were probably well aware of the outcome of the battle and had a rough idea of what was going to happen. Ren Qingquang's fighting style was open and straightforward, like a thunderbolt. He had displayed his swordsmanship to its fullest and was commendable. Guo Nuanyang's counterattack was incisive, but he was an assassin after all. What he was best at was attacking from the dark and killing with a single strike. Therefore, there was basically no advantage to speak of in a head-on battle like this. If Guo Nuanyang were to ambush Ren Qingquang in the dark, Ren Qingquang would never be able to escape Guo Nuanyang's fatal strike with external factors and his strategy. However, when it came to a head-on battle, Guo Nuanyang still had the ability to fight, but the difference in their strengths would grow as time went on. Eventually, he would be defeated. Ren Qingquang has comprehended sword will as well. His actual ability is on par with Shi Wuchen's. As for Guo Nuanyang, his position in the Dark Hall should be the most suitable. Yun Yang gradually came to a conclusion. The battle between the two men went on for another 10 minutes before Guo Nuanyang jumped out of the ring and asked for his elimination. "I'm not participating in the subsequent battles anymore. I'll withdraw from the 9 Supremes ranking battle directly." Guo Nuanyang chuckled humorlessly. I'll only know how tough you fellows are after fighting with real weapons. I'm an assassin, fighting you guys in broad daylight is just me taking things too hard. Chapter 994. Everyone was stunned by Guanuanyang's words, awkwardness etched on their faces. No one spoke for a moment, obviously surprised by Guanuanyang's choice. Just as Guanuanyang had said, this seemingly fair battle for the 9 Supremes ranking had its inherent drawbacks to Guanuanyang, who was proficient in assassination. Facing such an awkward situation, Guanuanyang was not discouraged. Instead, he asked, Boss Yun, can the residents of 9 Supremes set up a branch that specializes in assassination in the future? Yun Yang chuckled. I didn't have such a plan initially. Guanuanyang looked dejected as he said dejectedly, then what should I do? Direct combat really isn't my forte, Yun Yang said. It's true that I didn't plan to set up a branch that specializes in assassination, but the residence of 9 Supremes that I envisioned has a dark hall under it. Looking at the entire residence of 9 Supremes, there won't be anyone more suitable than you to be the leader of the dark hall. Guanuanyang sprung up in delight. This is what I like to do the most. From now on, I'm the leader of the Dark Hall. No one is allowed to snatch it from me. The group was stunned again before they guffawed, sweeping away the awkward atmosphere. Whoever snatched it from you would be a fool. The next match was between Lan Ruojuan and Wu Menghuan. Lan Ruojuan was known as the Yellow Robe of Frost Sword while Wu Menghuan was known as the Purple Robe of Golden Needles. After watching the previous 3 matches, Yun Yang was looking forward to the duo's performance. He wanted to know if they lived up to their nicknames and how amazing they were. Once the battle began, however, everyone was dumbfounded and speechless for a moment. Lan Ruojuan was dressed in his usual yellow robes and had a frost sword as well. It was as if he lived up to his name. However, the moment the battle began, he tossed the frost sword away like a hidden weapon and replaced it with long yellow needles. He even held 2 slightly thicker needles in his hands. His movements were elusive, advancing and retreating in an unpredictable manner. Wu Menghuan, on the other hand, was dressed in a purple robe. He had unleashed a torrential rain of golden needles right from the start, as if he lived up to his name. However, after the rain of needles, he flipped his wrist, and a long sword appeared in his hand. He had become one with the sword, and the level of his swordsmanship was not inferior to Shi Wuchen or Ren Qingquang. Subconsciously, Yun Yang covered his eyes. He could not bear to watch. Between the two of you, who is using a sword and who is using a needle? Wasn't he supposed to live up to his name? He clearly needed to change his clothes to truly match his nickname. Okay. The battle ended with Wu Menghuan winning by a narrow margin. Lan Ruojuan snorted and went to wait for the next battle. The 4 victors so far were Shi Wuchen, Wu Menghuan, Ren Qingquang, and Tai Qingcang. 3 of them were sword cultivators. Just in time, the last 2 members of the group entered the arena. The vicious physician Ping Xiaoyi and the star soul swordsman Luo Dejiang. Ping Xiaoyi was skinny and small, looking like a monkey. Luo Dejiang, on the other hand, was tall and broad, almost as tall as Dong Qitian. The moment both of them entered the arena, they stood opposite each other, causing another round of laughter. Dong Qitian grinned. It's like a monkey show in the middle of a busy market. Luo Dejiang was holding a saber in his hand. The saber was slightly taller than Ping Xiaoyi when it was planted on the ground. With a helpless expression, he said, Xiaoyi, just admit defeat. I really can't muster up the energy to fight with you. Ping Xiaoyi squinted and said, it's your problem if you can't muster up the energy, but I'm full of energy when I fight with you. Luo Dejiang sighed and drew his saber. The moment the saber rubbed against the scabbard, a dragon's roar and tiger's roar could be heard. The saber was unsheathed, gleaming with a cold gleam. Even Dong Qitian could not help but be moved at this moment. Luo Dejiang stood there innocently, but he gave off a subtle feeling that he was connected to heaven, earth, saber, and man. His entire being was like a towering mountain made entirely of saber, connected to heaven and earth. Endless saber intent spread out from his feet, extending endlessly. The saber descended slowly, pointing forward. An indomitable, domineering aura swept out. For a moment, the sand and dust on the ground flew, covering the entire arena. Faced with such an aura, Ping Xiaoyi subconsciously took a step back. One could not help but feel a sense of indomitable cowardice the moment they came into contact with such a powerful aura. How could Ping Xiaoyi not know this? With a loud cry, he straightened his body, straightening his already scrawny frame. With a casual wave of his hand, a sword quietly appeared in his hand. The blade vibrated slightly, emitting a buzzing sound. Ping Xiaoyi did not draw his sword immediately. He raised his empty left hand, and a gust of greenish-black mist spread out. He chuckled and said, "Dajiang, if I don't seize the opportunity with poison today, I'm afraid we don't even have to fight. However, if I use poison, your chances of winning are slim. It'll be difficult for you to defeat me." Luo Dajiang's eyes were half-lidded as he said faintly, "Really?" He reached into his robe with his right hand and took out a white pill that emitted a rich fragrance. He popped it into his mouth and grinned, saying, "Bring it on." Ping Xiaoyi was stunned when he saw this. He was dumbfounded and speechless. He was stunned again before he jumped up as if someone had hit him on the butt. He shrieked, You. Luo Dajiang. You're shameless, you're despicable, you're a complete and utter hooligan. Luo Dajiang snorted. How am I a hooligan? Ping Xiaoyi jumped up and down in exasperation. You dare say you're not a hooligan? If you're not a hooligan, why did you take the 10,000 dispelling pill when you fought me? Where did you get the 10,000 dispelling pill? From above, a crisp voice said smugly, I gave it to you. What about it? Everyone looked toward the source of the voice and saw Jiang Luoluo standing gracefully on a high spot, her face filled with glee and satisfaction. Ping Xiaoyi was dejected as he murmured, You. Aren't you ganging up to bully me? How can you do this? Luo Dajiang let out a long howl and pressed on with his victory. Isn't anticipating the enemy's moves and using a targeted strategy a must in battle? You can only blame yourself for not being able to find a wife until now. My wife gave it to me, so of course it belongs to my family. Are you coming or not? Come up and fight. Ping Xiaoyi stomped his foot and said, What's there to fight? You've used the all-dispelling pill, so normal poisons won't work on you. Those strange and vicious poisons can't really be used on you either, so what's the point of fighting? Am I just asking for a one-sided beating? The people above were already holding their stomachs and panting with laughter as they watched. The all-dispelling pill, as its name suggested, was said to be able to cure 10,000 types of poisons. It was one of the strange and precious medicines in the bound of universe. Once consumed, one would be immune to all poisons for 3 years. Chapter 995. Luo Dajiang swaggered. Can't you just say it? Are you going to fight or not? I admit defeat. Ping Xiaoyi sheathed his sword in an extremely aggrieved manner and murmured, Just you wait, you too. See if I don't overdose you on the night of your wedding night. Who asked you two to scheme against me? Jiang Luoluo blushed and said, Ping Xiaoyi, I'm not afraid of you. If you dare to poison me, I'll dare to drink it. Your threat has scared me. From now on, as long as you like a girl, I will do my best to destroy you. In the future, I will badmouth you in front of all the sisters-in-law and sisters-in-law in the residence of 9 Supremes and make you a bachelor for the rest of your life. Even if that girl is really blind, I'll pester her to badmouth you every day. We're in the residence of 9 Supremes anyway, I know all your dark history. If I don't do it, I'm not Jiang Luoluo. Do you think I dare or can't do it? Ping Xiaoyi was dumbfounded. He cried out, "Spare me, big sister. I was just saying. I'll be frank, I'm taking it seriously anyway." Jiang Luoluo raised her head. Ping Xiaoyi howled miserably, "Is there still justice in this world? This. Luo Dajiang, why don't you control your wife? You're bullying me together." Luo Dajiang was unperturbed. "We're not married yet. She'll only be my wife after we're married. She's just a confidant now. Why should I control her? Besides, I'll do it just because you ask me to. Who do you think you are? How dare you?" Ping Xiaoyi was utterly speechless, utterly disheartened. When you two work together to trick someone, you're husband and wife, a couple. But when someone comes to settle the score with you, you're separated and become confidants, each doing his own thing. I've seen something like this. Ping Xiaoyi bowed and begged for mercy, but Jiang Luoluo ignored him. Ping Xiaoyi was drenched in sweat from anxiety, looking flustered and fearful. As the first family member of the residence of 9 Supremes, Jiang Luoluo's influence was not to be underestimated. If she was determined to sabotage Ping Xiaoyi, it would be difficult for him to find a wife, boss. Ping Xiaoyi looked at Yun Yang pleadingly. "Help. You can't play like this. This is related to my marriage and the inheritance of my ancestors." Yun Yang held back his laughter and said with a straight face, "Ping Xiaoyi, what are your intentions? You actually want me to offend a woman? Haven't you heard that it's better to offend a supreme being than to offend a woman? You actually want to frame me. You really have ulterior motives and are harboring evil intentions." Ping Xiaoyi was at a loss. "Then what should we do?" "What should we do? Hurry up and beg for mercy. You can find a wife when your sister-in-law forgives you. Don't think about it for now. If your reputation is ruined and it gets out, you'll be ruined." Yun Yang's expression was solemn while the rest of the crowd was gloating. Ping Xiaoyi chased after Jiang Luoluo to apologize, but Jiang Luoluo ignored him. Ping Xiaoyi was so anxious that he bowed and groveled. In the end, he made some unknown conditions and Jiang Luoluo seemed to finally relent. When Ping Xiaoyi returned, the first match of the second round of the 9 Supremes ranking had already ended. Shi Wuchen vs Wu Menghuan, a dominating victory. Although Shi Wuchen, Ren Qinghuang, and Wu Menghuan were known for their swordsmanship, there was still a difference in their strengths. Shi Wuchen was a level higher than Wu Menghuan after all, so it was not too surprising that he won. It was short and concise. As the matches went on, it was finally time for the final battle. Shi Wuchen vs Luo Dajiang. To be honest, Yun Yang was not surprised that Shi Wuchen could make it to the end, but he did not expect Luo Dajiang to make it this far as well. The 5 people who won were roughly on par with each other in terms of cultivation base. Among them, Shi Wuchen might be the strongest, but it was only by a hair's breadth. It was not an overwhelming advantage. In every battle, the strategies and tactics used were crucial to victory and defeat. Shi Wuchen's consecutive victories were by no means a fluke. Luo Dajiang, on the other hand, had an unusual tenacity that was more resilient than Shi Wuchen. He grew stronger in the face of strong opponents and never showed weakness. Moreover, he grew braver the more he fought, giving off the feeling that the brave would emerge victorious in a narrow path. As a result, they overcame all obstacles and advanced triumphantly to the final battle. Now, the 2 men stood facing each other. Even Dong Qitian was unprecedentedly cautious, paying full attention to the field. Among the 2 people in the field, one was a king of swords, the other an overlord of sabers. Neither of them was mediocre. The outcome of this battle would surely be earth-shattering and earth-shattering. The reality was as expected. Shi Wuchen was determined to win the position of the residence of 9 Supreme's second Supreme. Luo Dajiang, on the other hand, had emerged as a dark horse, looking as if he was the best candidate for the position. Therefore, the clash of auras between the two men had already left the crowd dumbfounded and aghast. Jiang Luoluo, who stood behind Yun Yang, looked nervous. Her pretty eyes watched the field without blinking, her two tiny fists clenched tightly as she muttered, "You must win. You must win." Yun Yang was amused and teased her. Shi Wuchen's cultivation base is second to none among the demiurge flawed 10. Luo Dajiang most likely won't win. I'm afraid your wish will be dashed, Miss Jiang. Jiang Luoluo glared and pouted. I thought you were a good person. I didn't expect you to be so evil. Shall we make a bet? Yun Yang asked, what bet? What about the stakes? Jiang Luoluo said, if Luo Dajiang wins, you give me a piece of ethereal amethyst. What do you think? What if Shi Wuchen wins? Yun Yang asked. Jiang Luoluo rolled her eyes and said, I'll be your brother's wife as a punishment. You won't lose out on this deal, will you? I've only bet my entire life on a piece of ethereal amethyst. You're the one who's getting the better end of the deal, aren't you? Yun Yang smiled wryly, rubbing his nose. This girl really knew how to make a deal. She had to at least use her bare hands to make a deal, but she did not even use her hands. That won't do. Yun Yang shook his head and said, there's no such way to bet. Jiang Luoluo said, how about this? When your wife comes in the future, I won't say anything bad about you. Otherwise, when she comes, I'll tell her that you always tease your brother's wife, and that I'm one of the victims, just one of the victims. Yun Yang was dumbfounded, completely defeated. Yun Yang finally understood the girl's valiance. He was full of admiration for her, and smiled wryly. All right, all right. As you wish, I'll bet. Chapter 996. Dong Qitian looked askance at Yun Yang and cursed inwardly, dumb bird. You can come and chat with this old man if you're bored. Why do you have to provoke women? Don't you know that women are the most unreasonable creatures in this world? They're the only ones. Dong Qitian coughed and said, I still remember the legend that the former lord of the East Celestial Palace was asked by a friend to give him two choices. One was to reason with his wife, and two was to fight the demon emperor. He was asked to choose either option. He said slowly, reasoning with his wife is just a matter of words, but fighting the demon emperor is a battle of life and death. There's a huge difference in difficulty. But do you know how he chose? Yun Yang was intrigued. How? Dong Qitian said, the Lord chose to fight the demon emperor without any hesitation. And the last battle was really fought. Yun Yang was sweating profusely. He was sweating like a waterfall. That senior is truly a role model for our generation. At this moment, the hum of a sword and the hum of a saber rang out at the same time. The unity of man and sword. The unity of man and saber. As soon as the two of them made their moves, they both displayed their trump cards at the same time. Shi Wuchen has comprehended sword will and has reached the realm of having nothing else but his sword. Dong Qitian looked at the battlefield and said, he's not far from the level of comprehending the heart of the sword. What about Luo Dajiang? Luo Dajiang's level is about the same. Dong Qitian said, his saber will encompasses his entire body and has nothing else but his saber. Although he didn't comprehend much about the heart of the saber and didn't even go that way, he has comprehended something else. That is, there's nothing in this world that can't be used as a saber. It doesn't matter who wins or loses this battle. The only thing that matters is, as long as these two people can continue to walk on this path, and they don't die prematurely, then, the bound of universe will give birth to a true sword emperor and saber emperor once again. As the battle progressed, the two men in the field were gradually getting serious. Shi Wuchen and his sword turned into a murderous autumn wind, accompanied by the autumn rain, frost, and dew. The autumn wind, the autumn rain, and the autumn dew filled the field. At this point in the battle, he had already used the tri-autumn swordplay 7 or 8 times. The sword intent became more and more bleak, more and more like the chill of autumn. Basically, every time it was used, it would give birth to a completely new understanding. As the 3-autumn sword technique continued to be used, the bright and beautiful spring was gradually dyed into a bleak autumn. Shi Wuqian's state of mind grew colder and colder as he unleashed his sword will, but his sword light grew smoother and smoother. His face was filled with a desolate and excited murderous intent. On the other hand, Luo Dujiang, on the other hand, maintained the strategy of attacking steadily and surely. He was like a towering mountain, unshakable, but he was not just defending without attacking. Once he switched to attacking, he was like a raging wave, indomitable and unyielding. Dong Qitian watched the scene attentively and could not help but sigh softly. "What is it?" Yunyang asked. Dong Qitian said faintly, "Shi Wuqian has already comprehended the true essence of the sword and is stepping into another stage. However, the stage he's stepping into now is the wrong path, a path that he can only look at but not reach. Even if he manages to step on it, it'll be difficult to turn back and there'll be endless troubles in the future." Yunyang was speechless. Although Yunyang's judgment was impressive, his experience was still miles away from Dong Qitian's. That was why he was puzzled by Dong Qitian's comment. In Yunyang's opinion, Shi Wuqian had already gained the upper hand and was slowly steering the battle to his side. His chances of winning were very high, but why was it a terrible situation in Dong Qitian's eyes? Just based on this battle alone, the outcome is already clear. Shi Wuqian will win without a doubt. Dong Qitian said, because he has comprehended his own heart of the sword in this battle. There's no doubt about it. In spite of this, both sides have embarked on 2 completely different paths in this battle. After this battle, the main thrust of Shi Wuqian's sword intent is to abandon everything in this world and be loyal only to the sword, then to the residence of 9 supremes, and nothing else. Luo Dujiang is different. Other than being loyal to the saber and the residence of 9 supremes, he's also loyal to himself, to his brothers, to his friendship, to his family, and to his ties. Dong Qitian sighed softly. Yunyang was silent for a moment before he said in a low voice, "I kind of understand what you mean. Is it because Shi Wuqian's current sword realm is too extreme that even if he gains a momentary advantage, the consequences will be far-reaching? But Luo Dujiang doesn't have such a worry?" Looking at the intense battle between the 2 men, Dong Qitian said, "Yes. This difference lies in the difference in the nature of these 2 men. Is it really that serious? Loyalty to the sword and the residence of 9 supremes, there's nothing else besides that. There doesn't seem to be anything bad about it. Why is it that it's hard to turn back from the past and leave lasting consequences?" Yunyang asked. "Whether it's good or bad depends on the person, and the wise man will understand it on his own." Dong Qitian smiled. "Some people have selfish motives, some don't. Some live for their ideals, some live for reality. It's just a difference in perspective, there's no difference in superiority or inferiority. Living for ideals usually doesn't lead to a good ending, but living for reality allows one to experience life's various forms and achieve greatness," Dong Qitian said. "The reality I'm talking about here isn't selfishness. Do you understand this?" "I do," Yunyang answered. "Shi Wuqian, as a swordsman, should be loyal to the sword, but he's too obsessed with it. That's biased. Going too far is as bad as not going far enough. In other words, he's successfully entered the world of the sword, but he's immersed in it and can't get out. After a long time, how can it not be hard to turn back from the past and leave endless consequences? A true expert must know when to advance and when to retreat, to be at ease. This is the best state to reach the peak," Dong Qitian said. Yunyang murmured, he walked into the world of the sword, but he can't get out. He's obsessed with the sword. He felt that he seemed to understand a little, but there were still many things he did not understand. Dong Qitian smiled and said, it's not necessarily a bad thing that you don't understand now. However, if you can comprehend something from this, it'll be the best. Dong Qitian stood with his arms behind his back after he finished speaking, his gaze distant. After a while, he said slowly, back then, there was a custom in my hometown. Whenever someone died in the village, they had to hire someone to play the suona. In our village, there's an old man called Old Uncle Chin. He's especially good at this kind of suona instrument. His first song makes people cry, and the second he plays it, it's heartbreaking. No matter which family holds a funeral, Old Uncle Chin is always invited. As soon as he arrived, the atmosphere, which was originally only 30% sorrowful, became 10% sorrowful under his playing of the suona. The wailing of ghosts and the howling of gods was nothing difficult. As he spoke of the past of his hometown, Dong Qitian's face showed a rare hint of gentleness and nostalgia. His gaze was distant, as if he had returned to the small mountain village of the past, the place that he yearned for day and night. Thousands of years had passed. It had been so long since he had gone back. He turned to ask Yunyang, have you heard of the suona being played at a funeral? Yunyang was confused. Of course I have. It's the same custom in the empire of Yutang. As long as one's family has some wealth, they'll hire someone to play the suona to send them off during the funeral. It's probably the same in the Tianxian continent where I'm from. Dong Qitian nodded in relief. I've heard that the bound of universe and another realm came from the same source. It looks like the fundamental customs and traditions of both realms are the same, even though there's a clear distinction between the cultivators of both realms. Back then, there was a child called Wugang in our village. Both his parents had passed away, and he grew up eating food from other families. Old Father Chin was lonely all his life, still a bachelor in his old age. Seeing that Wugang was pitiful, he took him in. Wugang grew up gradually, but he didn't have any skills when he was in his teens, so he decided to learn how to play the suona from Old Father Chin for a living. Yunyang was baffled by Dong Qitian's sudden storytelling. Old Father Chin? Wugang? Suona? Funeral? What was this all about? How could these stories have anything to do with the intense battle before them and the obsession with the sword realm? However, Old Father Chin was unwilling to let Wugang learn the suona from him. He kept saying, child, it's not that I don't want to teach you, but, once you enter my line of work, it'll be hard for you to turn back. I'm afraid that I'll ruin your life. However, Wugang didn't understand Old Father Chin's words at all. Learning this skill didn't just mean that he'd gain a skill, he'd be respected by everyone in the surrounding villages. They'd invite him whenever they needed him, and he'd be treated as a distinguished guest. Why would he ruin my life? I'd have food to eat, drinks to drink, and I could earn money too. How could that not be good? However, Old Father Chin refused to teach him. It was not until he grew old and could no longer play the suona, that Wugang still didn't have a skill. He begged him again and again, saying, you're getting on in years, you might not be able to play the suona anymore. I still don't know anything, and when you leave, I can only be a beggar. Are you still unwilling to teach me? Are you going to watch me die of hunger and cold? It wasn't just Wugang. A few elders in the village also came to persuade him. Old Father Chin sighed and said, since that's the case, I'll teach you. However, there's one thing I have to make clear. Don't hate me in the future. Wugang's face was full of joy and he agreed repeatedly. Hence, Old Father Chin began to teach Wugang how to play the suona. Wugang had some talent in the suona, and he'd been by Old Father Chin's side for a long time. He was influenced by what he saw and heard, and his foundation was very good. He quickly got the hang of it, and the rhythm he played was perfect. However, it didn't have that sorrowful and desolate feeling. Hence, every time old Father Qin went to a funeral, he would bring him along so that he could personally experience the sorrowful and desolate feeling of the funeral suona. Old Father Qin said that when playing the funeral suona, you definitely couldn't play it in a festive manner. Funerals had to have their own style and rhythm. If you couldn't play it, even if you learned how to play it, no one would invite you. Wu Geng firmly remembered old Papa Qin's words and wholeheartedly followed old Papa Qin to learn how to play the suona. After a few years, everyone said that Wu Geng's suona playing was becoming more and more like old Papa Qin. Everyone fought to invite him. That year, when old Father Qin passed away, Wu Geng played the suona the entire night. From then on, whenever there was a funeral, everyone would invite Wu Geng to send them off. Wu Geng would play the suona in this kind of atmosphere. The more he played, the more desolate it became. The more he played, the sadder his mood became. The more he played, the sadder his mood became. In the end, Wu Geng didn't find a wife, and he didn't have any children even when he was old. When he was old, he finally understood what old Father Qin meant when he said that it would ruin his life. Funerals were sorrowful, parting, despair, desolation, and misery. The suona player had to have the same mood to play the suona. Only then could he truly match the family's mood. Only with this kind of skill would people often invite him. However, if he maintained such a mood for a long time, how could he find a wife and take care of his children? He wouldn't even have that thought anymore. He would only feel that life was boring, filled with sorrow. Therefore, before Wu Geng died, he buried the suona that had accompanied him his entire life into the ground. In his later years, there were many young people who wanted to learn from him, promising to take care of him when he was old, but he never accepted a single disciple throughout his entire life. After that, the elders in the village who had heard old Father Qin play the suona at Wu Geng's funeral said that ever since old Father Qin and Wu Geng died, the people in the village no longer felt like they were dead. Dong Qitian finished his story in a desolate tone and said, "Do you understand now? Shi Wuchen's sword has gone into the cold." Yun Yang exhaled softly and said, "I understand now. Everything comes back to its origin, and no matter how it changes, it remains the same. Cultivating the way of the sword is the same as the way of the suona. If one doesn't put his heart and soul into it, it'll be difficult to learn it well, and achieve nothing. However, once he puts his heart and soul into it, he won't be able to control himself. He can enter but can't exit, and he might be controlled and trapped by his own cultivation, losing himself." "That's what you mean, right?" Dong Qitian said, "That's right. Everything comes back to its origin, and the source is the same." In other words, Shi Wuchen is now on the path of being obsessed with the sword and being controlled by the sword. He's not controlling the sword now, but the sword is controlling him. "Is that what you mean?" Yun Yang asked. Dong Qitian sighed and said, "That's right. Shi Wuchen is now in the upper realm of the sword, where there's nothing else but the sword. He no longer cared about anything in the world, and even himself was no exception. The only fortunate thing is that he hasn't gone too far on this path. There's still affection in his heart, and there's still the residence of 9 Supremes. There's still a chance for him to turn back." Yun Yang turned his head and looked at the ongoing battle. His gaze was fixed on Shi Wuchen, who was gradually gaining the upper hand, and he did not say a word. Dong Qitian continued, "If there comes a day when he doesn't even care about these, then he'll truly be a slave to the sword. Once he's devoured by his inner demon, he'll sink into hell with no turning back. Once the cold penetrates his heart, there'll be no turning back." This isn't an exaggeration. When that time comes, any expert can only kill him at most, but it'll be impossible to pull him back. Because he'll only be another Wu Geng. Dong Qitian looked at Yun Yang meaningfully. "I've read this story before and suddenly remembered it. Then, I thought of Lu Xiaofeng's friend, Shimen Chueshue, the peerless swordsman who was merciless after his battle with Yi Gucheng. Chapter 997. A long howl of the sword could be heard, like a dragon's roar in the sky. Everyone could clearly sense the scent of victory from the sword's howl. However, the bleakness of autumn seemed to be even more pronounced. In the arena, Luo Dujiang staggered 7 steps back, his face pale. There was a gash on his left chest that extended all the way to his lower right abdomen. Fortunately, it only tore his clothes and did not really hurt his flesh. It was obvious that Shi Wuchen had shown mercy. The battle was intense but not dangerous. "I've lost." Luo Dujiang straightened up, his face full of admiration. "Shi Wuchen, your sword has reached the level of heart and sword as one. I accept my defeat wholeheartedly. The second supreme of the 9 supremes, Supreme Sword, is well-deserved. I accept my defeat wholeheartedly." A smile appeared on Shi Wuchen's face. "You flatter me. I've only touched the threshold, but your current level has surprised me as well, Dujiang. I don't even have much strength left to stand. If the last strike didn't work, it would have been my turn to admit defeat." As he spoke, Shi Wuchen's body swayed, looking like he could barely stand. It was not an act. His head, face, and body were drenched in sweat. It was only after the battle was over that he started sweating. His face was pale, and his eyes were almost out of focus. Be it Shi Wuchen or Luo Dujiang, they had given it their all in this battle. The remaining 8 members of the Demiurge Flawed 10 who were watching from the sidelines looked solemn. It was obvious that no one doubted Shi Wuchen's victory at all. The second supreme of the residents of 9 supremes and the title of Supreme Sword were well-deserved. They were well-deserved. Both Shi Wuchen and Luo Dujiang were panting heavily. A puddle of water could be seen under their feet. Yunyang looked at Shi Wuchen's heartfelt smile despite his exhaustion and said thoughtfully, "I don't think it's that serious." "Since there are signs, we can't ignore it," Dong Qitian said. Yunyang smiled faintly and said, "We just have to nip it in the bud." None of the brothers of the residents of 9 supremes would be led astray. With so many brothers by his side, if we still allow him to continue making mistakes after discovering the signs, then it would be our dereliction of duty, our fault, and not his fault. Dong Qitian was stunned when he heard that, remaining silent for a while. Although he did not speak, Yunyang's words had stirred up a tsunami in his heart. He silently asked himself, is this the so-called brotherhood? Yunyang announced loudly, "Now, the first place of the 9 supremes ranking battle has been decided, and it's Shi Wuchen. From now on, the Triautumn Swordsman, Shi Wuchen, would be the second supreme of the residents of 9 supremes, Supreme Sword. Does anyone here have any objections?" The Demiurge Flawed 10, excluding Shi Wuchen, sighed in unison and said, "Shi Wuchen's a lucky bastard to be the second venerable. What can we do? Yi Tuo has finally lived up to his name." Shi Wuchen was furious. "Whoever dares to call me Yi Tuo again, I'll punish you according to the sect rules." Yunyang chuckled and fanned the flames. "Brothers, Yi Tuo doesn't seem to be in a good state right now. I'll make it clear here that he'll be the official second brother tomorrow. Be careful, everyone. Tomorrow would be the day. Not today." All 9 of them were quick-witted people. They understood what Yunyang meant instantly and flew up in unison, charging over like a swarm of bees. Amidst the howling, they instantly pinned Shi Wuchen to the bottom. Shi Wuchen was already exhausted after going through a huge battle. How could he resist such a group of ferocious fellows? He could only endure and allow himself to be at the mercy of others. With a cry, he was pinned to the bottom. At that moment, he felt as if he had been squashed out of his body. Even his voice had changed. "I'm going to punish all of you with the sect rules. Ow! Help!" He turned his head with difficulty to seek help from the bottom, only to see Yun Yang leaping up excitedly to the top and sitting down. Ow! Yay! Shi Wuchen rolled his eyes miserably. It was as if the last breath in his chest and abdomen had been squeezed out as well. Other than one of his legs twitching outside, he could no longer move the rest of his body. Ha ha ha, the 10 of them guffawed in unison. Tuo will definitely seek revenge, and now that he's the second brother, who's afraid of him? We have a boss. You're right. Sai, Tuo is the second brother. This Tuo is the second brother Tuo, this, ha ha ha. F*ck, Ping Xiaoyi, you're really a talent. What eloquence and thought. The battle to determine the position of Supreme in the residence of 9 Supremes had finally come to an end. The residence of 9 Supremes leader, Supreme Cloud, Yun Yang. Second Supreme Sword, Shi Wuchen. Third Supreme Saber, Luo Dujiang. Fourth Supreme War, Tai Qingcang. Fifth Supreme Madness, Ren Qingquang. Sixth Supreme Dream, Wu Menghuan. Seventh Supreme Lan Ruojuan. Eighth Supreme Shi Bujia. Ninth Supreme Moon, Kong Luoyue. Supreme Lord Deific Remnant, Guanuanyang. Supreme Lord Earthly K, Ping Xiaoyi. Chief Majordomo, Qian Duo. Chief Instructor, Dong Qitian. At this point, the residence of 9 Supremes' high-level forces were completed. The 9 Supremes took their respective positions while the 2 Supreme Lords under the position of Supreme performed their respective duties. Supreme Sword, Supreme Saber, Supreme War, Supreme Stone, and Supreme Madness belonged to the combat department. When the sect was in a battle, these Supreme Lord subordinates would take the lead in every battle. Supreme Lan was in charge of gathering intelligence, Supreme Dream was in charge of judging rewards and punishments, while Supreme Moon was in charge of managing the sect and communicating with the Majordomo. As for Tiancan and Earthly K, they were in charge of the sect's affairs that could not be dealt with openly. Once Tiancan and Earthly K made a move, there would be Tiancan and Earthly K. Among the Demiurge Flawed 10 taking the position of Supreme, Shi Bujia was probably the one who suffered the most. His ability was on par with Tai Qingcang and was not inferior to Luo Dujiang, but after the battle with Tai Qingcang, he had gone too far and was not strong enough, allowing Lan Ruojuan to take advantage of the situation. As for Shi Bujia, he was naturally a little unhappy. However, he let go of the matter after a few jokes. Just like what Yun Yang had said before the battle, luck played a part in the arrangement of battles, and luck was an important part of a cultivator's overall ability. Furthermore, there would be no harm if there was no comparison. Although he was only one of the 8 Supremes, he was still one of the 9 Supremes. There was still Kong Luoyue, Guanuanyang, and Ping Xiaoyi below him. Looking at Guanuanyang and Ping Xiaoyi, who were not selected for the 9 Supremes, they did not take it to heart at all. They looked cheerful and content. What else did he have to regret? Dong Qitian could only scoff at Yun Yang's assignment. It was too general, too perfunctory, too broad, it was child's play. He had never seen anyone manage a sect like this. Chapter 998. Although Dong Qitian had grown to like the atmosphere of the residence of 9 Supremes as time went by, and Yun Yang had taken the initiative to terminate the contract early, Dong Qitian might not have been willing to leave the residence of 9 Supremes. The affairs of the world were like a game of chess, unpredictable and unfathomable. However, Yun Yang had directly and forcefully decided on his position as the chief instructor. Dong Qitian was still displeased. How can I be ranked below all of you? Dong Qitian felt the need to argue with Yun Yang. I'm leaving. I'll leave once I'm done. However, he did not manage to say it out loud. Host of the 9 Peaks. Yun Yang ordered and continued. After the host of the 9 Peaks, you must place your hand on the platform in the center and channel your spiritual and deific consciousness into it until the platform glows. Wuxia and the others quickly arrived at their respective peaks and entered the main hall of the main peak. Their faces were filled with incredulity when they saw what they saw. Logically speaking, since the residence of 9 Supremes was established, no one had ever come to the main halls of the respective peaks. Even if they were not covered in dust, they should not be as spotless as they were now. However, when they looked around, it was clean and tidy, as bright as new. Upon closer inspection, he realized that it really was spotless, clean to the extreme. What was going on? Even if they had cleaned the place thoroughly, it was inevitable that some traces of cleaning would be left behind. How could it be so flawless? In each of the main halls, there was a strangely shaped purple crystal platform in the center, emitting a purple radiance. On the high platform, there was a flat plate with a handprint on it. It was obviously the place where Yun-Yang had placed his palm on it. The 8 of them placed their hands on it suspiciously, trying their best to channel their deific consciousness and spiritual energy into the imprint like a river flowing backward. They were still thinking, what's this thing used for? The moment they channeled their energy into it, everyone was shocked. When their spiritual energy and deific consciousness had been channeled to a certain extent, everyone could clearly feel that their deific consciousness seemed to have formed some sort of connection with the platform in front of them. It was as if there was an invisible line connecting him to the platform. This feeling was undoubtedly strange, but it was not fake at all. Just as this feeling appeared, the amethyst platform in front of him suddenly emitted a purple light. It became brighter and brighter, gradually sweeping out. Slowly, the entire mountain was enveloped in a layer of purple mist. After a while, the boundless purple gas drilled into the bodies of the 8 people. In an instant, it disappeared without a trace. The 8 of them opened their eyes in shock, only to discover that there was nothing in front of them. Where was the amethyst table? There was nothing in front of him except the smooth, mirror-like ground. That's strange. Is it magic? Everyone felt their scalps go numb. At this moment, all 8 of them heard Yun-Yang's voice at the same time. Did all of you hear that? The 8 of them subconsciously jumped up at the same time. Boss. Where was Boss? How? There's no need to look around, and there's no need to make a fuss. Yun-Yang's voice continued to ring in their minds, communicating directly with their primordial spirits. This is the biggest secret of our residence of 9 Supremes. Only the 9 Supremes are qualified to know and enjoy it. No matter where you are, as long as you're still breathing, you can use this secret to communicate with each other. Yun-Yang's voice rang indifferently. This is the top secret of the residence of 9 Supremes. No one is allowed to know about it. At this point, Yun-Yang's voice stopped ringing. However, these few words had stirred up a storm in the hearts of Wuxia and the others, and they could not calm down for a long time. The residents of 9 Supremes actually had such an almost nature-defying ability. They could communicate with each other at any time, anywhere, to exchange information, and to exchange what they needed. This was too domineering. One had to know that the most difficult thing to do in the martial world today was none other than the problem of communication. Unless it was a high-class celestial luck banner or above, only the palace-level high-ranking officials were qualified to use the communication jade to exchange information. Those who could use it freely were at least at the level of the East Celestial Palace. As for those below, they might not even be able to afford the cost of a communication jade. In fact, they did not even have the cultivation base to use the communication jade. However, the residents of 9 Supremes, a sect that did not even have a lower-class celestial luck banner, could solve this insurmountable problem so easily and effortlessly. This was not just nature-defying, it was simply. There was no way to describe it. In short, it was too freakish, too demonic, too inhuman. Even if they were separated by thousands of mountains and rivers, they could communicate whenever they wanted to. They did not even need to use any spiritual energy, and they could chat whenever they wanted to. What a pleasant surprise it was. However, there were even more pleasant surprises that came one after another, each higher than the last, crashing into the newly promoted 9 Supremes. Before they could calm down from their excitement, everyone was surprised to find that their cultivation seemed to have increased, and it had increased by a large margin. Starting from Shi Wuchen, everyone's cultivation base had basically just broken through to Saint Level 3, but now, they had all skyrocketed to the pinnacle of Saint Level 3. The speed of advancement was not only stupefying, but also baffling. Since the beginning of time, there had never been such a rare, strange, and inexplicable event. Once one's cultivation base had reached a certain level, one would need to spend a few times more effort and time to advance further in the future. This was especially so for people like Shi Wuchen and the others who had reached Saint level at such a young age. If they wanted to advance further in the future, which one of them did not have to rely on the accumulation of years and endless hard work? 3 to 5 years was already a godly speed. Those below 10 years were geniuses. It was normal for those who had 30 years of accumulation to break through in one day. Who would have thought that the residents of 9 Supremes only needed an hour? Although everyone knew that the sudden increase in their cultivation base was due to the fact that they had just ascended to the position of 9 Supremes and the resonance of their deific consciousness and soul with the mystical amethyst platform, it was a benefit that they had obtained with the help of the boundless amethyst chi. However, the benefit was still a little too shocking. Shi Wuchen tried coughing, imitating the method Yun Yang had taught him. Cough, cough. What followed was a series of dissatisfaction. Itua, are you crazy? What are you coughing for? Yes, why are you coughing? You scared your father. Shut up if there's nothing else. May I ask what orders the newly promoted second brother has for me? There was actually someone who was sensible. It was Kong Luiyue's voice. Bootlicker. 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 Kong Luoyue, you shameless bastard. Why didn't your father realize that you're actually this kind of trash? That's right, that's right. You're just a piece of trash who fawns over my smelly feet. Your father is ashamed to be associated with you. Shi Wuchen snorted and said, what are you being so noisy about? I'm talking about serious matters now, not making a fool of myself. You've all heard what boss said just now. I don't want this secret to be known by anyone other than the 9 of us. This is the most realistic issue, and we must strictly abide by it. Chapter 999. The remaining 7 people immediately fell silent. Shi Wuchen said, Boss was embarrassed to make it clear just now. Can't you guys hear it? Keeping it a secret may be hurtful to the other 2 brothers, but if it gets out, it might be even more hurtful. Can't you guys figure this out? The group sighed in unison after a moment of silence. Shi Wuchen was right. His words were crude, but his logic was not. If this were to get out now, it would be extremely hurtful to both Ping Xiaoyi and Guo Nuanyang. Everyone had this right except for the 2 of them. We can think about how to compensate Xiaoyi and Nuanyang in other aspects. At least, let them catch up to them in terms of cultivation base. At times like this, we have to think more for our brothers. Put yourself in their shoes instead of talking about martial world loyalty blindly. That's not how loyalty works. Shi Wuchen snorted and said in a low voice. The 7 of them were immediately convinced and said in unison, Second brother is right. Shi Wuchen nodded and said nothing more. Suddenly, Yun Yang's voice rang in his ears. Wuchen. Shi Wuchen hummed in acknowledgement and sensed carefully. I'm talking to you alone now. The others can't hear me. Yun Yang said, don't make a sound. Don't leak the secret. Shi Wuchen nodded, feeling even more surprised. It turned out that the exchange of information could be presented in a more private manner. My knowledge and understanding of the Demiurge Flawed 10 is rather limited. Most of it comes from your introduction. Yunyang said, therefore, you'll have to keep an eye on our brother's emotions, moods, friendship, and daily interactions from now on. I hope to be brothers with all of you for life. It's definitely not a short-term collaboration. Yunyang said, Wuchen, your task is rather arduous. It's a long way to go. Sure, Wuchen felt a great sense of responsibility pressing down on his heart and body. For a moment, his heart felt heavy. He said, don't worry, boss. As long as I, Sure Wuchen, am here, I guarantee that we brothers will never fall apart. Then I'm relieved. Yunyang reminded him, think of your brothers more if you encounter anything in the future, especially everyone's feelings. You don't just have a sword, you have us too. Don't forget, I understand. How could I forget? Sure Wuchen answered seriously. Yunyang did not speak anymore, the hidden stillness in his heart finally relaxing a little. According to Dong Qitian, Sure Wuchen had only just stepped onto the wrong path. There was still a long way to go before he reached the so-called path of no return for the Sword Devil, where he had nothing else but his sword. If he continued down this path, there would be a day when he would step onto the path of a single man. However, if from now on, he was to be more responsible for the Brotherhood and experience more of the Brotherhood, how could he be a lone man? At that time, even if he wanted to abandon his sword and have nothing else, it would be very difficult to do so. Anyway, you, Sure Wuchen, are the second Supreme, the second most important person in the residence of 9 Supremes. If you don't take responsibility for such an important matter, who will? As long as this layer of shackles hung in his heart, even if Sure Wuchen wanted to be merciless, his future path would not be cut off. Dong Qitian, who was still in the residence of 9 Supremes, could clearly feel the subtle change in the spiritual qi. The originally abnormally rich spiritual qi atmosphere suddenly doubled again. There were even wisps of purple qi swirling in the air within the residence of 9 Supremes now. Although the purple qi was weak and almost undetectable, the majestic qi of Tao was real, and it entered the eyes of an expert like Dong Qitian. Delighted, Dong Qitian mobilized his deific consciousness, intending to observe and identify it carefully. However, the faint purple qi only flowed for a moment before it dispersed and could no longer be found. However, Dong Qitian discovered another shocking fact: the purple qi had a fixed amount. The number of people in the residence of 9 Supremes now corresponded to the amount of purple qi. Each faint wisp of purple qi found a person's body precisely and quietly melted into it. Countless disciples of the residence of 9 Supremes felt nothing. At most, they felt a little more invigorated, but they did not understand what was going on. However, all the high-level cultivators seemed to have been enlightened, and they were inexplicably shocked. What was going on? Among them, Dong Qitian's feeling was the most obvious. At that moment, he acutely felt that all the muscles, bones, and meridians in his body had relaxed considerably. The impurities that had accumulated in his meridians for so many years rippled slightly as the faint purple qi entered his body. His own cultivation also advanced a little because of the purple qi entering his body. With Dong Qitian's actual cultivation base, this small step was almost equivalent to 10 years of hard work by the Demiurge Flawed 10 and the others. It was not an easy feat. It's a newly established sect that doesn't have the celestial luck banner to increase its providence. How could it have the qi of Tao? Dong Qitian was so shocked that he almost fell to the ground. This aura. It has to be at least a palace sect. No, even a palace sect doesn't have it. His deific consciousness spread out instantly, engulfing the entire residence of 9 Supremes, intending to confirm the situation. With a single glance, he was astonished once more. Under his deific consciousness, he could clearly sense that the wisps of qi of Tao were gradually seeping into the bodies of every child in the residence of 9 Supremes. These children, on the other hand, had a seed of Tao planted in their bodies from now on. Whether they could sprout and take root in the future depended on the individual's luck, but the seed was already there. This alone was enough to put them at the forefront of all the disciples in the world. How could the seed of Tao be obtained so easily? Those who were fated with it had to go through countless hardships and hundreds and thousands of years of cultivation, going against the natural order, in order to seize a tiny bit of it from heaven's Tao and grow stronger. Only then could they talk about becoming a pinnacle powerhouse. Perhaps, it could be said that even if you had the seed of Tao, you might not necessarily become an unparalleled powerhouse. However, if you did not have the seed of Tao, you would never become a pinnacle powerhouse. It was that absolute. However, the disciples of the residents of Nine Supremes had obtained it so easily. While Dong Qitian was still in shock, the qi of Tao swiftly integrated and disappeared, and he could no longer feel it. In spite of this, the waves of shock in Dong Qitian's heart grew more and more uncontrollable. He could not help asking himself, "I've been imprisoned for 4,000 years, only to witness the birth of such a sect when I'm released. Is this God's will or man's will? Is it hardship? Or is it fate? Since the beginning of time, when has such a sect ever appeared? Thousands of disciples with the seed of Tao. What a heaven-defying sect this is. Is it a stroke of luck that I'm able to stand in such a sect, or is it fate?" Chapter 1000. On the other side. Heaven's sword and earth's saber had not stepped out of the house for many days, focusing on recuperating their bodies. After all, this was Yun Yang's residence of Nine Supremes, and they were not his people. If they knew too much, they would feel awkward and uncomfortable. In spite of this, during the period of recuperation in the residence of Nine Supremes, Li Yisan's frail body that was on the brink of death had actually stabilized successfully. Most of this was due to Song Changgong's windless day and night infusion of energy regardless of the cost, but the geographical advantage of the residence of Nine Supremes was also crucial. Li Yisan's current condition was showing signs of improvement, and this was definitely not the result of Song Changgong's infusion of energy. Although it was only a sign, it was still a good sign. Both elders were delighted. No matter how open-minded Li Yisan sounded, no one was willing to die if they could live. Today, on the day that the Nine Supremes had returned, both of them unexpectedly felt the presence of the force of Tao. It had even burrowed into their bodies uncontrollably. Li Yisan's withered body suddenly trembled and the qi of Tao entered it. He opened his eyes at once and asked, "Big brother, do you feel it?" It had been a long time since his eyes glowed. When he opened them now, there was a glimmer of light. Although it was just a flash, it was truly a flash of divine light. Li Yisan heaved a soft sigh of relief and said in a low voice, "Big brother, with today's opportunity, you don't need to inject mystical qi into me for at least half a year." Song Changgong was even more shocked as he cried out involuntarily, What's going on?" Li Yisan smiled faintly and said peacefully, "Big brother, it's already a great fortune that we could be here at the right time and enjoy the occasion. There's no need to pursue the other reasons. It's better not to know." He said slowly, "If the Commerce League asks about this in the future, are you going to tell us or not?" Song Changgong laughed. "You're right, brother. It's better not to know." He then closed his eyes and focused on recuperating and cultivating, completely dismissing the thought of going out. As the leader of the residents of Nine Supremes, Yun Yang was keenly aware that the 9 peaks were connected, the earth veins were converging, and the mountain guarding formation was undergoing further changes. As the density of the spiritual qi grew denser, the shadow of the celestial luck banner was summoned from his body. Yun Yang wrote the residents of Nine Supremes on the illusory shadow seriously. Then, it was Supreme Lord Yun Yang, the 8 Supreme Lords of the 8 Peaks, Shi Wuchen, Luo Dujiang. He planned to participate in the Celestial Luck Banner contest 5 months and 27 days later. Finally, he filled in the address and the place he belonged to. Then, he used his finger to draw a line on his left hand, and a drop of blood dripped onto it. Blood essence irrigation. The celestial luck banner suddenly lit up and emitted a flame-like brilliance. With a soft whooshing sound, the words on it disappeared without a trace. The celestial luck banner returned to its illusory form. After a while, the image of the celestial luck banner changed again, and 3 large words slowly appeared. It has been recorded. Yun Yang watched the 3 words appear until they disappeared before he stood up slowly. I'll go take a look at my disciples. The expedition has begun. A total of 99 disciples were selected this time. Each peak was given 10 of them, so there were 19 people left. These 19 children naturally stayed in the central peak and became Supreme Cloud's disciples. The disciples of the Supreme Central Peak were slightly more than those of the other peaks. This was also the practice of every sect. The 19 children who were confirmed to stay in the central peak were lined up neatly, their faces half anxious and half excited as they waited for their sect leader to receive them. Yun Yang was surprised as he looked around with his illuminating eye. Each of these children was of good quality. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were gifted and blessed by the heavens. However, were these children not a little too young? There were 12 boys and 7 girls among the 19 children. Each of their gazes was bright and focused, their chi flowing in their veins. Although the weather-beaten look of having just escaped from the human medium had not completely disappeared from their faces, they had already begun to transform. In fact, the process of transformation was already halfway done. A few of the little girls' faces were already quite bright and lively, and they looked very playful and adorable. From their appearance, all 19 of them were thin and weak. They were looking up at Yun Yang with gleaming eyes that were filled with longing and hope, as if they were looking at the only God they had ever seen in their lives, looking up to him in awe. Yun Yang only took a glance before turning to leave. He could only feel his temples throbbing in pain. How frustrating. Xian Duo stood at the side with his chest puffed out and his belly bulging out. He moved closer with a face full of eagerness to be rewarded. Boss, I've been extremely meticulous in my selection for you this time. The 19 children in front of me are all the cream of the crop, the cream of the crop. He, Yun Yang was already fuming. Now that he heard Xian Duo's words, he felt even more stifled. He sighed helplessly. Fatty, let me ask you, how old is the oldest among these 19 children? The oldest is only 9 years old. Their meridians and bones are being trained and nurtured. They have a bright future ahead of them. How old is the oldest of the disciples who were sent out? About 14 or 15. Although they are all extremely talented, they're still lacking compared to yours. Huh. Fatty, this is the central peak. Yun Yang looked at little Fatty like he was looking at a retard. Do you know? Of course I do. This is the central peak. Fatty looked puzzled, unable to comprehend the situation. The disciples of the central peak must have a senior brother of the sect in the future. Don't tell me you don't know this? Yun Yang had the urge to suck the fat fellow's oil out and light him up as a sky lantern. Of course there is, of course. How can I not know? Little Fatty nodded, looking confused. He did not know what Yun Yang meant. But the disciples you picked for me are clearly younger than the other disciples, okay? How do you expect me to choose the eldest senior brother of the residents of 9 Supremes? Yun Yang rubbed his temples and suddenly exploded. Can't you grow some brains? Grow some brains? Sigh. I've forgotten about that. Little Fatty was speechless. The fact that they are younger is secondary. This is not an urgent time, so there's still room for negotiation. But now, do you know when it is? The battle of the Celestial Luck Banner is just around the corner. There's less than half a year's time at most, and the disciples of the Central Peak have to fight in the battle. Otherwise, how can they serve as an example? Yun-yang glared at Fatty as if he wanted to devour him. You want me to bring this group of little turnips to fight when the battle starts half a year later? Master Jin Yong has passed away. Chapter 1001. Little Fatty was at a complete loss. His eyes darted around, finally realizing that he seemed to have gotten himself into big trouble. Should I ask them for a few older ones? They're all disciples, it doesn't matter if I change them. Do you think this is child's play? Yun-yang's spittle kept little Fatty from opening his eyes. I'm the leader of the sect, the supreme in charge, and I'm going to find someone else to change them when I feel that my disciples aren't good enough? Where's my face? If you're shameless, I'm shameless too. How am I going to manage the sect in the future? Little Fatty's eyes were wide open in confusion. What do we do then? We have to solve it no matter what. What do we do? Nothing. Yun-yang rolled his eyes exasperatedly, thinking that he had been tricked badly by this Fatty this time. Little Fatty had kept a batch of disciples with the best aptitude for himself. Of course, it was out of good intentions, but doing so would only serve as a source of gossip. These disciples were younger than the other disciples, so it would be difficult for them to be of use in the short term. That was the real problem. When the sect was gathering, others would bring their disciples in large groups while he, the leader of the sect, would bring a group of children. When others' disciples could be put to use, his own disciples could only watch from the sidelines. What a freaking situation it was. This situation would not improve for at least 3 to 5 years. After all, the oldest among his first batch of 19 disciples was only 9 years old. They were all textbook versions of Shota Lolas. Sigh. Yun-yang sighed from the bottom of his heart. Other than sighing, he really did not know what else to say. Unexpectedly, Dong Qitian's dissatisfied voice rang in his ears. What are you sighing for, child? If you're not satisfied with them and are unwilling to take them as disciples, you can transfer them all to me. This old man doesn't mind their aptitude, or their age. Dong Qitian had wanted to say that they were not gifted, but his conscience prevented him from lying through his teeth. In the end, he attributed the problem to their age. Yun-yang almost spat blood. Boss, are you saying that they're not old enough? Although it's indeed an issue of their age, the real problem that needs to be solved isn't here. Dong Qitian snorted, his tone full of disdain. The 19 children's excitement was long gone, leaving only anxiety. Why did their leader go back in after coming out? Why doesn't he look happy? Could it be that you're not satisfied with us? But it was clearly the chief manager who jumped out one by one. Even if 1 or 2 of us weren't good, could it be that all of us weren't good enough to enter the head venerate's eyes? Just as the little ones were feeling uneasy, they saw their sect leader Shizhuan slowly walk out from inside. He was handsome and dignified, with the bearing of a monarch looking down on the world. The little ones couldn't help but feel respect for him, and their awe was even stronger than before. From now on, all of you are the nominal disciples of the Central Peak, Yun-yang said faintly. I will teach you the cultivation method in unison, treating all of you equally. The children listened attentively, staring at Yun-yang without blinking. After that, there will be a small competition every 10 days. Following the 9 Supremes' order, I will rank the 19 of you. 2 months later, the top 10 will become this lord's inner disciples. The rules outside of the contest are even simpler. Yun-yang smiled. I won't urge you to cultivate intentionally. All the progress of cultivation depends on your own will. Yun-yang made it sound simple. In spite of this, the children's expressions grew more and more serious, becoming unprecedentedly serious. Everyone understood the sect leader Shizhuan's meaning clearly. In the residence of 9 Supremes, only the strong would be respected. What was the point of nurturing the weak? Although the sect leader Shizhuan did not say what would happen to the other disciples other than the inner disciples who had been chosen, their subsequent cultivation would definitely not be good. However, the key to this outcome was their own hard work. Without further ado, Yun-yang began to impart the cultivation method to the little ones. According to the bound of universe's rules, such basic cultivation methods were basically the same. When there was a need to choose a cultivation method that suited each individual's characteristics, it had to be above the level of heaven mystic. At the very least, it would only be meaningful to nurture the disciples who had reached that level. Not only was it not suitable to impart advanced cultivation methods to the new disciples, it was also easy for the school's unique cultivation method to be leaked. The weaker one's cultivation base was, the easier it was for accidents to happen. Whether it was being robbed by outsiders, eliminated by the school, or a lack of progress in cultivation, it was all possible for the school's cultivation method to be leaked. Therefore, the more advanced cultivation methods would only be imparted to the disciples after they had reached a certain level. However, the situation with the residents of Nine Supremes and Yun-yang was different. Although he was also imparting basic cultivation methods, Yun-yang observed each child carefully for a moment before he picked out several cultivation methods and distributed them to the 19 children. Yun-yang had given a total of 7 cultivation methods to the 19 children. The cultivation methods that the boys and girls cultivated were especially different. Teaching in accordance with the students' aptitude from this stage? Dong Qitian watched Yun-yang's actions from the side. His heart skipped a beat as he was inexplicably shocked. Teaching in accordance with the student's aptitude was easy to say, but it was extraordinarily difficult to actually do it. Everyone's foundation, meridians, talent, aptitude, personality, and temper were all different. It was easier said than done to accurately grasp them. However, Yun-yang had done it the first time he met these children. It was a grand gesture and an astonishing boldness. I'd like to see if your teaching in accordance with the student's aptitude is a random arrangement or if it's really true. Then, Yun-yang spent the entire day teaching the basic cultivation method as well as a set of movement skills, a set of footwork, a set of palm skills, a set of fist skills, a set of sword skills, and a set of saber skills to the children. Of course, other than the movement skills and footwork that were taught uniformly, the palm, fist, sword, and saber forms were taught in accordance with the student's aptitude. Each had its own emphasis. After a day and a night like this, when he looked at these children again, he was surprised to see that every one of them had practiced to a decent level. Although it was just a stance, there was no substance to it. The result was enough to make Dong Qitian and Qian Duo click their tongues in wonder. In cultivation, every set of movement, sword, and fist forms had its own requirements. Each move and style had to have at least a certain degree of precision. They were all things that had been passed down through thousands of years of practice, so there was almost no room for change. If one's wrist was raised or lowered by an inch, the distance between one's feet was wider or narrower when one took a step, if one's shoulders were a little higher or a little lower, if one's gaze was a little off, all of these would result in the difficult mastery of this technique. The slightest difference could lead to 1,000 miles of difference. This was the most suitable example here. Therefore, martial arts cultivation required talent first and foremost, a talent that not everyone possessed. Imitation, memory, and physical agility and coordination were the basic requirements. However, to be able to completely memorize the cultivation technique in a single night and even memorize a set of movement technique, a set of footwork technique, a set of palm technique, a set of sword technique, and a set of saber technique at the same time like these little fellows, they were undoubtedly rare peerless geniuses. Even for those top-notch celestial luck banner disciples, there were only a handful of geniuses who had photographic memory. In spite of this, it was only Yun-yang's first time teaching disciples, but the 19 children he had taught had all done it without exception. Chapter 1002. Young Yun, how did you do it? I don't believe that these children are all geniuses who have photographic memory and can remember everything they hear. Dong Qitian's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. It's really not my credit. At most, I've imparted the cultivation methods and techniques as meticulously as possible. As for how these children can improve so quickly, it's mainly because their previous experiences were too painful and I've given them too much pressure just now. Everyone has focused their full attention on absorbing and imparting, so there's no reason for them not to remember. What Yunyang said seemed reasonable, but he was not telling the truth. The real reason for this miracle was Emmy. Yunyang had asked Emmy to examine each person's potential and choose the most suitable foundational cultivation method. He then taught them saber, sword, and fist skills according to each person's unique traits. This itself was already twice the result with half the effort, not to mention that Emmy had secretly released its mental energy during the teaching process to help the children memorize, allowing them to draw inferences from one instance. However, this was Yunyang's biggest secret, so it was not convenient to tell Dong Qitian. Actually, you could have recorded it in jade slips. Wouldn't it save more time and effort to write it directly into the brain through jade slips? Dong Qitian asked. Saving time and effort often means that the effect can't be maximized. If you really do that, it'll definitely cause a weak foundation and a lack of knowledge. Yunyang said, if that's the case, there's already an innate difference before we've even reached the level of competition. I want to give them the feeling that every step they take forward requires them to exert all their strength to complete it, only then can they achieve something. This way, this group of brats will work even harder and never look back. The method of storing jade slips in one's deific consciousness with one's own deific consciousness isn't suitable now. The most suitable method now is to let them use their own efforts to obtain that opportunity. Yunyang said, there's no such thing as reaping without sowing in the residence of 9 Supremes, nor will there be any special care. What they want, they must obtain it through their own efforts. Those who don't work hard or don't work hard enough will only fall to the state of being eliminated. Dong Qitian did not speak. Yunyang's method was harsh and extreme, but the disciples who were taught using this method only had one goal in their eyes in the future, to be number one. Furthermore, everyone was fighting for first place. In front of them, behind them, and beside them, there would always be a group of equally arrogant companions who were unwilling to fall behind. In such a competitive atmosphere, it was not an easy thing to not improve. Aren't you worried that they'll kill each other? Dong Qitian asked suddenly, his question hitting the nail on the head. I'm not worried. If this went on, it was inevitable that disciples who killed each other would appear. When that time comes, we can just kill the chicken to warn the monkey. Yunyang said indifferently, raising the rules and restrictions now is far less effective than punishing them at that time. Dong Qitian was silent for a long time. After a long time, Dong Qitian sighed softly. I'd really like to see how the disciples you've taught and the sects you've developed with this method of yours would look like 10 or 100 years later. Would it be brilliant or withered? Yunyang smiled. I want to know too. The 19 children had already entered the training room to cultivate. Each of them was cultivating diligently in the most arduous state. Some were meditating, some were deep in thought with a frown, and some were diligently practicing their movement, footwork, and swordsmanship. The only thing that was consistent was that each of them was giving it their all without holding back. This was something that anyone could see. In less than an hour's time, the floor of the training room was already stained with sweat, and gradually, the sweat dripped down in large patches. Yunyang watched for a while longer and turned to leave without a word of comment. His action exerted more pressure on the children. Xian Duo asked from the side, isn't this a little too much? What if there's someone who can't handle the pressure? Yunyang turned to look at him strangely. They'll be eliminated if they can't do it. What's the point of coming if they can't even handle this pressure? I'm taking in disciples, I won't be babysitters. Xianduo's chubby face trembled. It's too cruel. I'm really glad that I'm not your disciple, Yunyang snorted and looked at him from the corner of his eyes. Majordomo Qian. When the day the residence of 9 Supremes soars into the clouds and dominates the bound of universe, when the 9 Supremes' cultivation base reaches the level of transcendence and sainthood, if the Majordomo's cultivation base is still far from being able to keep up, you know, little fatty paled. Big brother, let's not fool around. Fool around? Do you think I'm joking with you? When that time comes, even if I don't dismiss you, do you think you can still do this job? If even your grand disciple's cultivation base surpasses yours, what face do you have to be the Majordomo of the residence of 9 Supremes then? Yunyang glanced at him from the corner of his eyes and said nothing more. However, his words had already made little fatty think about it seriously, his expression turning anxious. That's right. If it really comes to that, what face do I have to occupy the position of Majordomo? No, I have to seize the time to cultivate as well. Even if I can't rise to the top of this world, at least I can't be too far behind. But even with such a high-pressure training, the residence of 9 Supremes is destined to be unable to make it in time for the Celestial Luck Banner contest half a year later. Do you have other plans? Dong Qitian asked. Why not? I've chosen to officially open the residence now to make it in time for this round of the banner contest and obtain the Celestial Luck Banner. Yunyang sighed softly as he watched the spiritual qi whirlpool in the residence of 9 Supremes getting thicker. A month later, I'll need Elder Dong to refine the cultivation base enhancing medicinal pill again. All right. Dong Qitian's eyes were filled with interest as he agreed readily. Yunyang had, of course, won the bet between him and Jiang Luoluo. Jiang Luoluo actually came to congratulate him after the incident. Congratulations, big brother, for winning the bet with me. The corners of Yunyang's lips twitched as he flashed an amiable smile. Winning or losing is just a game, but as the first family member of the residence of 9 Supremes, Big Brother naturally has a welcome gift. Jiang Luoluo was elated. I want the ethereal amethyst. Yunyang was speechless. I was going to give you the ethereal amethyst as a welcome gift. If you win, you take it away, if you lose, I'll give it to you. What's going on? Luo Dajiang, who was standing aside, did not speak. As Yunyang gave the ethereal amethyst away, he could not help sighing. Dajiang, although you're honest and kind, you'll never suffer a loss in this life with a wife like this. Luo Dajiang stuttered, Boss, this is all fate. Chapter 1003. Almost at the same time, many sects with celestial luck banners had received news and even specific information from the challengers. These could be hidden before the battle, but from the moment the challenge was submitted, there was no longer any secret to speak of. Sects with mediocre class and above celestial luck banners were strong and did not receive many challenges, but those with lower class celestial luck banners faced an overwhelming number of enemies. It was especially so for the 3 sects with lower-class celestial luck banners that were ranked at the bottom. They were almost in a state of panic at the slightest movement. Kangwu Union, which ranked last, looked like it was facing a formidable enemy. Looking at the long list of challengers, its leader was so worried that his hair had turned white. Why are there so many challenge letters? There are actually more than 100 clans that want to challenge us. And among these 100 clans, who will win in the end? Who will get the final qualification? There are records of these sects before us, so we have a rough understanding of their strength. But what is this residence of 9 Supremes? What is its background? When was it established? Why is there no record of it? Check. As the news of all the challenges spread throughout the world, countless sects began to respond. Some prepared, some went out to battle, and some went out to fight. Those with celestial luck banners naturally did not move for the time being, actively preparing for the battle and guarding against an unexpected attack. Those without celestial luck banners, on the other hand, were looking for opponents because those who wanted to challenge a target sect with a celestial luck banner needed to defeat 10 other sects to qualify for the challenge. For this reason, the residence of 9 Supremes, which had been established for the shortest time and seemed to have no foundation, naturally became the weakest target and the best stepping stone to qualify for the challenge. Get rid of this residence of 9 Supremes first. The higher-ups of more than 20 sects made the same decision one after another. Getting rid of the residence of 9 Supremes first could not only increase their qualifications and eliminate an opponent, but they could also train their soldiers and let other sects of similar strength fight first to deplete their strength. It was a good opponent that could kill many birds with one stone. How could they miss this opportunity? Let's go. Who is the hero in all the mountains and rivers? The martial world reigns supreme, the world is king. The celestial luck is in heaven, who can get it? For a time, the countless sects and rivers under the jurisdiction of the Sacred Heart Palace started to boil like a pot of boiling oil. 500 miles away from the Sacred Heart Palace, in front of Mount Fivefold, there was an even more spectacular scene. Mount Fivefold was a unique and famous mountain around the Sacred Heart Palace. The entire mountain was shaped like a pagoda. Apart from the fact that the mountain was unusually huge, there were strict restrictions on each mountain. It was the battlefield of the Celestial Luck Banner battle for hundreds of thousands of years. The first mountain realm of this mountain was only limited to the competition for the Celestial Luck Banner. Those who could go to the second mountain realm were qualified to compete for lower-class Celestial Luck Banners. As for the higher third and fourth mountain realms, they were the battlegrounds for the middle-class and upper-class Celestial Luck Banners, while the fifth mountain realm was the place where the higher-ups of the Sacred Heart Palace ruled, rarely visited by outsiders. When the Sacred Heart Palace officially spread the news of the start of the Celestial Luck Banner battle, it was equivalent to ordering all sects with Celestial Luck Banners to stop all external expeditions. Anyone who wanted to participate in the Celestial Luck Banner battle must travel day and night and arrive at their destination. All the sects with Celestial Luck Banners had to completely close their doors during this period of time, and no disciple was allowed to go out. This restriction was, of course, to prevent sects with Celestial Luck Banners from suppressing or even annihilating their target opponents after they had information about their opponents. There were many restrictions on sects with Celestial Luck Banners in the Celestial Luck Banner battle, but there were no restrictions on itinerant sections. In other words, all restrictions were lifted. The winner was king, and the loser was a thief. To obtain the qualification to challenge for the Celestial Luck Banner, one must first struggle out of the bloody martial world. The process was already full of the survival of the fittest, so one could do anything, and the restrictions were meaningless. Based on this creed, the residents of 9 Supremes received 13 challenge letters in a day as soon as the Celestial Luck Banner battle began. They were all challenges that they had to fight. However, the problem was that there were bound to be losses in battle. No matter how strong their combat strength was, could they be unscathed in the face of such continuous challenges? Not fighting? They could, but not fighting meant losing the qualification to challenge sects with Celestial Luck Banners in the future. Could they not fight? On the other side, in the territory belonging to the Sacred Soul Palace, a legend had quietly risen and spread like wildfire. An organization called the White Robes Alliance had begun to rise and expand rapidly. Knowing that the war was imminent, Wuxia and the rest naturally focused on teaching their disciples. Even if they did not consider the upcoming Battle of the Celestial Banners, just the training of the disciples between the 9 peaks was already an element of inconspicuous competition. Hence, the 9 peaks were in a frenzy. From the whetstones of the down-and-out martial world to the absolute higher-ups of the residents of 9 Supremes, the Demiurge Flawed 10 were rubbing their palms together with a burning fighting spirit, eager to make contributions and live up to the recognition. In addition, they were also very satisfied with their newly recruited disciples. Although these disciples had a shallow foundation and were almost starting from scratch, not only were these children gifted, but their perseverance and tenacity were also extraordinary. A few of them had quietly broken through their chakras on the night of the Nine Supremes' return, and there were even miraculous geniuses who had broken through 2 or 3 chakras. This reality, of course, made the Demiurge Flawed 10 even happier. Geniuses. They were obviously a bunch of geniuses. However, no matter how much of a genius they were useless now. Although the other 8 peaks and 8 supremes had disciples who were slightly older than Yun Yang, the oldest among them was only a little over 10 years old. Shi Wuchen and the others felt that they would not be able to pass the test of sending such children to battle. In the Celestial Luck Banner battle, the higher-ups participating in the battle had to at least have the cultivation base of a saint. This was not the standard, but, if one did not have the ability to fight when the others had already surpassed this cultivation base, one might as well not even fight. Otherwise, one would only be courting death. This was a battle of raw strength, there was no element of luck to speak of. No matter how lucky one was, in the face of an absolute gap in strength, even if one could be lucky once or twice and be lucky all the time, a slight misfortune would mean death. The battle formations that participated in the battle were the core disciples of various sects, and the disciples who participated in the battle had to have at least the cultivation base of a supremacy, although each of them was only a first-level supremacy. There was almost no one who was higher than 1 level, and they were not even as good as little fatty Qian Duo who had just met Yun Yang. However, the highest cultivation base of the residents of 9 Supremes' disciples was only a heaven mystic. Chapter 1004. To put it bluntly, it would be that, according to an ordinary person's cultivation speed, after training for 200 years, they would probably be able to participate in the war. The cultivation atmosphere in the residence of 9 Supremes was undoubtedly excellent. The spiritual qi was thick like liquid, and one's cultivation base could be improved with just 1 breath. However, one needed time to improve. Judging from the current situation, they would not be able to make it to the Celestial Luck Banner competition half a year later no matter what. Moreover, before the competition, there was still the qualification outpost for the elimination battle of the martial arts world. The entire residence of 9 Supremes was cultivating diligently, determined to advance. The teachers were meticulously urging, teaching, and learning, and the disciples were doing their best to improve themselves, yet, someone had to come knocking at their door at this time. Outside the mountain gate, a long howl shook the heavens as a warning sign sounded. The challengers' sect had already arrived. Kong Luoyue, bring your disciples and eliminate one of the challenging sects. Shi Wuchen sat in his hall and gave the order, his face expressionless. If he had not experienced it himself, he would not have imagined the unique communication system of the residents of 9 Supremes. After trying it out, he marveled inwardly that the communication in the residence of 9 Supremes was so convenient. He was sitting in his own peak, but the order had already been delivered to Kong Luoyue. There was not even a moment of delay. Awesome! Shi Wuchen had already planned to teach his disciples, but after some thought, he added, fight more cruelly and bloodily. A one-sided battle won't train anyone. Kong Luoyue's face contorted when he heard that. F***ck. If he had known earlier, he would have gone to Tiancan and Deke. As the 9th elder of the residence of 9 Supremes, all the dirty and tiring work would be his, and he would be the frontline officer. Although he had expected it, he did not expect it to come so soon. I haven't even settled down yet, however, there was no other way. This was an order from the sect, and there was no room for negotiation. If the leader did not speak, Shi Wuchen had the final say. This was the authority of the 2nd Supreme. Kong Luoyue led 10 disciples and walked out with a gloomy expression. Let's go, I'll bring you to witness the martial world's killing. This is the first battle since the founding of the residence of 9 Supremes. It's significant and must not be underestimated. Among the 10 disciples, the oldest was only 15 or 16 years old while the youngest was only 7 or 8 years old. They did not show any signs of fear or retreat, instead, they followed behind Kong Luoyue excitedly. Finally, could he witness the legendary Jianghu? Outside the door. The leader of the Black Tiger sect was standing in front of the mountain gate with 30 to 40 people from his sect, his face dark. Was the residence of 9 Supremes too arrogant? Generally speaking, as long as you accept this kind of challenge, aren't you going to invite us in? Why hasn't the Great Mountain Guarding Formation been activated to welcome us in? There hasn't even been a greeting. What kind of explanation was that? There were more than 10 groups of people waiting in the forest behind him. When they saw the awkward expressions of the people from Black Tiger sect, they took pleasure in their misfortune. If you wanted to pick it up for a moment, you would fight to be the first one. Humph, are you ashamed now? Let's hope that the residence of 9 Supremes works hard and defeats the Black Tiger sect. Otherwise, we'll have to travel far and wide to find the next one. The leaders of a few sects had already begun to look around at the people from the other sects with malicious intent. These sects were all meritorious services, and also had the qualifications to do so. When the residence of 9 Supremes was dealt with, why not sweep away the dozen or so sects that came knocking on their door in one go? They did not have to sweep all of them. As long as they could gather 10 victories, they could participate in the Celestial Luck Banner contest. This was a golden opportunity, how could they let it go so easily? Kong Luoyue appeared in front of the residence of 9 Supremes with a head full of complaints and a dark face. Once he appeared, he stood with his arms folded and said impatiently, "Who's here to challenge the residence of 9 Supremes? Come forward quickly. I don't have so much time to waste on you." The leader of the Black Tiger sect took a step forward and said loudly, "I'm Guchang Tian, the leader of the Black Tiger sect." "Who are you? What is your position in the residence of 9 Supremes?" "You must know that I'm the Celestial Luck Banner." Kong Luoyue said with a dark face, "You're the one who came to challenge us. Are you going to fight or not?" "Who are you?" Guchang Tian asked angrily. Kong Luoyue said lazily, "Have you heard of the Demiurge Flawed 10? Guchang Tian was baffled. "I'm Kong Luoyue." Kong Luoyue said, "Serene soul of 9 Springs, one of the Demiurge Flawed 10, now the 9th Supreme of the residence of 9 Supremes. Do you understand?" Guchang Tian was getting more and more confused. Kong Luoyue said, "Can you understand human language? Are you going to fight or not?" Guchang Tian was still speechless. His mind was still in a daze. Since when did the Demiurge Flawed 10 become members of the residence of 9 Supremes? Kong Luoyue leaped up and slapped, saying angrily, "It looks like you really can't understand human language. I'll fight if you don't want to." With a loud thud, Guchang Tian's face was covered in blood as he was sent flying by the slap. Guchang Tian's cultivation base was about the same as Kong Luoyue's before his breakthrough, and he was also the leader of the Black Tiger sect, so his foundation was probably stronger than Kong Luoyue's. However, since Kong Luoyue came to the residence of 9 Supremes, Kong Luoyue had advanced by leaps and bounds, surpassing Guchang Tian by leaps and bounds. Moreover, the ambush came amidst the shock and was caught off guard. The palm strike turned into a shriek, but the man had a considerable cultivation base after all. As blood spurted out, he flipped away and shouted with difficulty, "Stop him." Then, his brain caught on and he bellowed, "So it's the bound of Universe Whetstone. Go!" Since Guchang Tian was the leader of a sect, he naturally had a considerable amount of experience. Through the palm strike just now, he knew that Kong Luoyue's cultivation base was already above his. However, Kong Luoyue had only brought a handful of people with him, and judging by their looks, they were just a bunch of children with mediocre combat abilities. Gu Chengtian's side was strong enough to fight. In spite of this, Kong Luoyue's main purpose this time was to establish his dominance. There was no way he would give Gu Chengtian a chance to counterattack. Without another word, the soul stinger was already in his hand as he crashed into the crowd of Black Tiger sect disciples. Disciples, watch closely. This is the martial world. The soul stinger shot out with a loud thud. One by one, figures fell to the ground, accompanied by blood-curdling screams. Fresh blood gushed out of their wounds. What rules are you talking about? I'm the rule in front of the residents of 9 Supremes. Kong Luoyue sounded furious. What the Demiurge Flawed 10 hated the most was being called a whetstone. Moreover, this fellow before them had called them the Bound of Universe Whetstone. Am I going to whetstone for everyone in the Bound of Universe for the rest of my life? Whetstone my ass. Your father will torture you to death and destroy the Black Tiger sect today. Kong Luoyue's true cultivation base was indeed above the Black Tiger sect's strongest combat power. It was evident from the fact that he had severely injured the sect leader with a single strike just now. Now that he had flashed the soul stinger, his combat power skyrocketed even further. He was going all out and was unstoppable. Under Kong Luoyue's merciless attacks, all 36 members of the Black Tiger sect who had come this time were lying in pools of blood in the blink of an eye. The outcome was beyond everyone's expectations. Chapter 1005. On the other side of the forest, there were many sounds of people sucking in cold breaths. There were noises coming from behind as well, but it was the sounds of vomiting that came one after another. Those who gasped were naturally the people from the other sections. Aren't we just picking a pushover to bully? Why does it seem like we've met an iron bench? Help! The vomiting noises were, of course, Kong Luoyue's disciples. No matter how talented the disciples were and how determined they were still a group of children in their bones. Their minds were pure and they were inexperienced in the ways of the world. Before this, they had never seen much fighting in the Jianghu, let alone such a bloody scene where blood could be seen with every blade. Who could stand the stench of blood that came with the wind? Suddenly, their eyes were filled with crimson and blood. The group of boys and girls paled, without exception. So, when their master said that he would bring them to see the martial world, he meant to let them see a massacre? Facing the blood and death at every turn. The martial world's rule is that the victor is king. Kong Luoyue's expression was grim, the soul assassin in his hand gleaming as he said faintly, "The Black Tiger sect has come to challenge us and I've killed them all. The martial world's grudge ends here. Disciples, go, chop off all their heads." The 10 boys and girls were dumbfounded when they heard him, their gazes dull as they stood rooted to the spot. Chop off the heads of the dead? Was he so cruel and merciless? I'll count to 10. Whoever can't do it will be banished from the residence of 9 Supremes from today onwards. Kong Luoyue said faintly, 1, 2, 3, 4, he continued counting without pause, not leaving any leeway. The 10 disciples were still dumbfounded, but they had no time to think as a bolt of lightning flashed through their minds. With a howl, they dashed out like a swarm of bees. In the forest, someone said sternly, "The martial world's grudge ends in death. Why do you have to cripple the corpses? Kong Luoyue, don't go overboard." Kong Luoyue's expression did not change as he continued counting, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Stop. When Kong Luoyue told them to stop, it was the girl who was the last to leave. She had severed the neck of a Black Tiger sect disciple on the ground and stood up with the head in her hand. Her pretty face was pale and she was trembling all over. However, she held the head tightly in her hand, shaking it against the wind without letting it go. End is pinched tightly. Looking at her pouting little mouth, it seemed like she would burst into tears at any time. Kong Luoyue's hawk-like eyes landed on the girl's face, not saying a word for a long while. Other than the little girl, the other 9 disciples were also holding human heads in their hands. Their faces were pale and their bodies were trembling. Their conditions were not much better than the little girl's. Carrying the head, the little girl trembled all over. Suddenly, she strode over and cried out in a trembling voice, "Master, I didn't exceed 10. Kong Luoyue's face was as cold as steel, unmoved and still silent. The little girl ran to Kong Luoyue's side as if her life depended on it. Suddenly, a cold glint flashed. A crescent-shaped machete appeared in the air and slashed at the little girl's neck, full of murderous intent. Kong Luoyue only watched coldly, unmoving. The little girl was about to reach Kong Luoyue's back. However, just as they were about to pass each other, the flying dagger that originated from the forest attacked with force. Honestly speaking, although the ambush was unexpected, Kong Luoyue's current cultivation base and ability could have deflected the flying dagger with a single move. However, his face was cold and he did not move, coldly watching the flying dagger fall in front of him. The little girl did not stop running but was about to lose her life to the flying dagger. Kong Luoyue was unmoved. Clang! With a loud clang, a sword blocked the fatal flying dagger at a hair's breadth. What followed was a wail of agony. It was a 13 to 14-year-old youth who had come with the residents of 9 Supremes this time. He took a step forward and blocked the flying dagger with the sword in his hand, saving the little girl's life. Although he had saved the little girl, he was counterattacked by the strong force of the flying dagger. Not only did it shatter the youth's sword, it had also entered his body and devoured his meridians. The youth cried out, his body shuddering violently as he spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood. Then, he fell backward. "Senior brother, bye." The little girl shuddered, her eyes filled with disbelief as she screamed, tears rolling down her cheeks. It was only when the youth fell that Kong Luoyue reached out and caught him. He looked at the 10 disciples coldly and said faintly, "You can't bear it anymore? Can you bear to watch your brother be killed with a single slash?" The remaining 8 disciples flushed, not only out of shame but also shame. Kong Luoyue's chilling voice rang in everyone's ears. "This is the martial world. If I don't die, the enemy dies. If the enemy doesn't die, I die." Kong Luoyue held the unconscious youth and said faintly, "Retreat." The 9 disciples shuddered again, looking up at Kong Luoyue in disbelief. A few of them cried out hoarsely, "Master." The enemy had ambushed their own junior sister and caused their senior brother to be gravely injured, his life hanging in the balance. Yet, their master was going to retreat just like that? Kong Luoyue said coldly, "Revenge? It's not your turn yet. Your performance just now was too cowardly and weak. The sect has asked us to return. What happens next doesn't belong to us anymore. Do you feel aggrieved now? What did you do earlier? All of you, return with me. Or do you want to hear me say it again?" Kong Luoyue held the injured disciple in one arm and beckoned the remaining 9 disciples back with a stern face. The little girl who returned last was already teary-eyed as she rushed forward. "Master, how is senior brother Bai?" Kong Luoyue replied indifferently, "So what if he's fine? If you had completed your mission earlier, why would you be asking about your senior brother now? Why are you spouting nonsense that doesn't help the situation?" He tilted his head to look at the little girl, his voice as cold as ice. "If you don't want anything to happen to your senior brother and junior brother, then behead your enemy early. Do you remember that?" The little girl was shaken. "Yes, master." "Humph. Go back. Master, we want revenge. Your actions have disqualified you from talking about revenge." Kong Luoyue said faintly, the only thing you have to do now is to return with me and not talk nonsense. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.